Hello everyone, welcome to our conference, TestExpo, Agile and DevOps Expo and Low Code Expo. My name is Shubhangi Konar and I thank you on behalf of the Unicom team for joining us today. I will start by welcoming and thanking all our presenters. We have a huge range of presentations today and a great set of speakers who I hope will challenge your thinking and provide new ideas, fresh perspectives, and techniques you can apply in your own organizations. This event forms a part of global conference series, which takes place in Europe and Asia and today online. As the title suggests, the conference addresses the synergy and interplay between software testing, DevOps, Agile, and low code. We encourage you to put your questions, thoughts, and ideas to the speakers during the Q&A and the panel and make the event interactive. Please continue the discussions on social media via Twitter. The hashtags are hashtag Unicom Expo, hashtag Agile, hashtag DevOps, hashtag testing, hashtag low code. These are also shown in the event guide. Unicom's Twitter handle is @Unicom Seminars. We love getting feedback on our events and would hugely appreciate it if you could please complete the feedback poll that appears on the screen after each session. This is valuable to us in our shaping future conferences, and we thank you for taking a few seconds to give feedback. Now I hand over to my colleague, Alec McKitchen, who is chairing today's program. Enjoy the day.
Hi, so welcome back everybody. After a great start to the program, I'm very pleased indeed to welcome our second presenter today, who's Nivati Jayaram. Nivati is Chief Data Officer at Société Générale. My French is terrible, so I hope that pronunciation is okay. We hopefully will have a few moments for questions at the end, so please do type your questions into the chat box, and I will now pass you on to Nivati. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alec. Good morning, everyone. This is Nivati Jayaram. And today I'll be talking about business-driven DevOps. Okay, I hope everybody is able to see my screen, Alec. Yes, okay, great. So, business-driven DevOps. When we talk about DevOps, usually it is considered to be a technology initiative in most organizations across the world. And that's what we essentially see in the state of DevOps reports as well, that are usually published across industry domains. So this is one of the excerpts that I took from State of DevOps report published by DORA in 2022. So if you can see here, most established organizations are also looking at implementing CI/CD pipelines or kind of technology aspects mostly that they are focusing on when they are responding to state of DevOps. I also try to look into the kind of metrics that we usually measure as part of DevOps transformations, that is deployment frequency or lead time for changes or mean time to recovery and so on, which are again more technology oriented. So even the latest State of DevOps report published by Puppet, it talks about the DevOps evolutionary model focused on platform-based services, which is where from technology standpoint that we are mostly moving towards across the industry. But is this the right thing to focus? When we talk about DevOps initiatives and even driving a business case for DevOps, the most significant element that we focus on as part of the business case is reducing the TCO, the total cost of operations for organizations, which is again an operational metric. And that is one of the reasons why we struggle in ensuring DevOps as a transformation initiative is prioritized by the organizations, and that results in a struggle for funding consistently as well. Now, when you think about DevOps, I always believe that DevOps is an extension of Agile, because for any organization to be realizing maximum benefits out of a DevOps transformation is that it can follow or it can complement an agile transformation initiatives. But again, in most organizations, you see these two running in silos, even though the focus of either of these transformation is to break the silos for a start. So that is probably the state you all would have been witnessing or would have seen across many organizations that you are engaged with as coaches or leaders or practitioners to be. Why we are talking about business driven DevOps? In 2022, I think McKinsey published a report which talked about the disruption becoming more and more frequent, and the impact of disruptions becoming more and more exponentially higher, which essentially means most organizations are looking at sustaining their businesses and then looking to evolve. So if we want organizations to consistently focus on DevOps being the transformation initiative that they need to prioritize, then we need to be able to showcase and really deliver the business results that the organization is looking for. So from that point of view as well, it makes sense to move towards business driven DevOps. So when we talk about business driven DevOps, what actually changes? So the alignment of the outcomes of the DevOps transformation are more towards the strategic objectives of the organization. And the collaboration that we look for is not just between the dev and ops, but it is more between dev, ops, and business. That means the way you try to address a DevOps transformation initiative in an organization is essentially to align it to the overall strategic objectives that are defined within the organizational environment, which usually is not the case when you talk about a DevOps initiative being driven. It's more technology driven, and that is again a bigger hurdle to look into. So how do you look into align to strategic objectives of the organization, and how do you really look to collaborate with business for a DevOps transformation initiative? Whenever you talk about planning a DevOps transformation roadmap, most of the times, and I may be sounding repetitive here, most of the times the organizations or the program leadership looks to align their roadmap and prioritize the scope of the transformation program is based on the total cost of operations. And the higher the TCO of an application or a team that is working on a certain application, the more emphasis on that particular part to be looked into from a transformation perspective. Now, instead of looking at that being the foundational means to scope a DevOps transformation roadmap, the best thing to do is to align them more towards the value streams that you have within the organization. The question that might be asked is it mandatory that we should always look to align to value streams? That means, is it mandatory to have value streams being defined to really move towards biz DevOps? Probably not necessary either. So you can do it in different ways. Of course, defining the value streams and trying to align or prioritize the teams that are aligned to the major value streams, which are the focus of the organization and which are aligned to the top priority objectives of the organization is one way to do it. The other way also is to see the overall alignment of a portfolio to the transformation organizational objective, and also the teams, whether you are following an art model for delivery or you are following a tribe or a squad model to deliver, or you are using scrum of scrums as your scaling mechanism, whichever is your framework that you are using to scale agility in the organization, you may choose that particular line of alignment to the top business objectives the organization has, and then try to improve the overall efficiency of the whole business process end to end that you are trying to focus, and then align your transformation initiatives towards that. So instead of optimizing a particular application that you are trying to address by implementing DevOps, can you think about focusing on a business process end to end, and then look at the different teams that would contribute to that particular business process and try to optimize the whole business process through that? So then what you are essentially doing is you are improving the efficiency of the whole process from a systemic perspective than looking at a part of the process in isolation. So when we talk about principles of biz DevOps, these are the 6 things that come to our mind. The first one is customer centricity. That means, are you prioritizing the DevOps initiatives with the customer in mind and the value that you are delivering to the customer in mind? Are you prioritizing these based on what is providing maximum value to the customer, or what is the most immediate need of the customer? Right? That is one thing which you can definitely think about from a customer point of view. Then when you talk about the next aspect is, are you looking to maximize the organizational outcomes by focusing on enterprise objectives than just focusing on operational efficiency? That means focus on business efficiency and focusing on maximizing the enterprise returns that they are looking for is the second aspect. And then the third thing is, for all of these to be accomplished, collaborate cross-functionally, not just within the technology space, but also involve business as part of your overall scope that you are trying to define for the DevOps transformation. Now, what will be the overall spectrum that you are looking to enhance is the business agility of the organization. If you go back to the current way the DevOps is being looked at, it's more to improve the technology agility or technical agility of the organization rather than looking to focus on business agility overall. You might argue that, okay, technical agility will contribute to business agility, but that's more an indirect or intangible outcome that we look at than a tangible direct impact that we like to create. So when you look to change the overall principles that we focus on from driving a DevOps transformation initiative from a technology orientation to business orientation or organizational orientation, then these principles, 6 principles, should really come in handy for you to think about and really talk about. Now, how do you implement biz DevOps in an organization that you are really focusing your efforts on? Right. So first is understand the strategic objectives and the priorities of those strategic objectives within the organizational spectrum. Once you understand that, you need to be able to clearly visualize the alignment of different portfolios in the organization and the product areas. If you are not having value streams, then look at the business processes which are aligned to those primary objectives in the organization, and then try to look at aligning your DevOps transformation roadmap to those value streams or those business processes which are currently being looked at to provide or to maximize the organizational outcomes. That is one way to align DevOps with business objectives. And for that to happen, invariably you will have to engage the product management and business operations teams in your definition of a transformation scope and the roadmap that you are looking to create. So rather than doing it in isolation from a technology perspective, engage the business to define which are all the teams that would participate and contribute their delivery to a certain business process within the organizational spectrum, and then look to prioritize the transformation roadmap based on that particular alignment and scope the transformation towards that. That is the first thing. Then one of the famous quotes that we have from Peter Drucker, which says what gets measured gets done. So if you are focusing on improving only operational efficiencies and the metrics are defined through that, then only that gets done. So change your measurement of success from focusing on what are delivery metrics or operational metrics to more towards the metrics that are defined for customer, right? And that are more business centric. So are we enhancing the customer retention ratio? Are we impacting the customer satisfaction? Are we impacting the time to market overall from customer request origination to request fulfillment? And how is your DevOps team through transformation contributing to that, improving the overall efficiency of the business process or the value stream? So how do you measure the optimization of the value stream itself? So that means the overall improvement of the cycle time. So all of these could be the metrics that you actually focus on rather than focusing on the technology metrics. Then collaboration and communication are very critical. So enhance the boundaries of your collaboration beyond the technology to product management and the business operations as well to implement or drive the implementation of the biz DevOps. Then focus on optimizing the whole system, not just part of the system. That is also very critical. And when you think about that, it might happen because of the new ways of working we are introducing as part of DevOps and the culture that we are trying to create. There might be a possibility of even redefining the business models to be more effective. That could be a very great outcome for the organization itself. So try to focus on optimizing the whole system that you are looking at from an organization and customer perspective, rather than focusing on just a one technology aspect of a delivery function of an organization. And then establish a culture of continuous learning and improvement. So don't just look at DevOps as a one-time initiative. It's a continuous process to maximize the returns for the organization on an ongoing basis. That is the sustenance basis. So that is something which you can think of. So these are some ways in which you can actually look to implement biz DevOps than the way you might be approaching a DevOps transformation right now, from a overall transformation perspective. Now, what are the benefits of doing all this? Is one, you would enhance the business agility of the organization. That means when you are able to focus investments on what is top priority of the organization, and if organizations want to reorganize or prioritize the investment to be able to adapt to the market changes better, then you are better equipping organization as well, because you are actually contributing to the most significant areas within the organizational system And by implementing DevOps, you are making it more flexible for them to reprioritize. It also results in better overall organizational performance, right? And which essentially means you are maximizing the returns to the organization from the investment that is made. Otherwise, think about the traditional model. If you go through the current, DevOps transformation approach and the ways and the focus we put around it, what is seen is by the time you have a direct impact to the end customer, you may need to have transformed 50% or more of the organization. That is when you will probably go back and influence the outcomes at an enterprise level, right? Otherwise, we keep working on pockets and optimizing the delivery efficiency of the organization or the operational efficiency of the organization. That won't directly provide a tangible outcome or maximize the impact for the end customer. But driving biz DevOps will essentially influence that. Alex,
Just
how
got
much
10
more
minutes.
time you have?
10 more minutes,
10 more minutes. Okay,
including
good.
questions.
Okay, thank you. So I'll probably accelerate a bit. So from that point of view, it provides better organizational performance, and it also helps you to innovate faster because you are focusing on specific aspects of the business, and the needs of the business are better understood. So which essentially means you are focusing on business problems and can improve your ability to innovate to what the organization is looking for. And it also improves the systemic thinking. That means you are looking at the whole organizational system than being within the siloed environment as a technology operating on DevOps initiative. Okay. Last but not the least, when you see that your effort as technologists in the organization is actually impacting the whole enterprise, and you are able to maximize the returns for the enterprise itself than just focusing on the technology aspect of the organization. Definitely it improves the overall employee engagement because of the outcomes that they are seeing, the impact that they create that is visible to them, and also the understanding they have in terms of the significance of their contributions to the overall enterprise. That definitely influences the overall employee engagement within the organization. So I think that is the last slide I wanted to talk about from overall transformation initiatives and how you move towards biz DevOps from driving DevOps transformation in the traditional model. I may be using traditional model, but when I say that in the current way of looking at DevOps transformation initiative in the organizations. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has. Okay.
Thanks, Nivati. Great presentation. Just a reminder, please type your questions in the chat box. We still have a few minutes. We've got about 7 minutes for questions. So.
Yeah, I see one question there. What are the critical challenges organizations typically face when transitioning to biz DevOps model? See, one of the major challenges is moving from our focus on improving operational efficiencies to business efficiencies. In most organizations, you won't see the mapping between the technology, applications or systems to the business processes. Everybody is working in silos, so you won't have the visibility to an end-to-end business process within the system. And then even if you have that visibility, you may not have the dependencies clearly laid out of the contributions that each of the technology teams make to each of the business process. That is the biggest challenge that we would see. So how to overcome them is primarily when you target a certain transformation within the organization, first look at understanding the top priorities the business has today, wherever you are focusing, whether you're doing the DevOps transformation top down or bottom up. Most of the times we do it in a bottom up approach, which essentially means you may be starting with one or two technology teams within the organization. Then you try to have a conversation with the technology teams on who their customers are within the organization. Start engaging and collaborating with them, and to identify the business process to which these teams contribute, and then try to systemically identify all the teams involved, and then have a conversation with the business to outline the business objectives they are contributing to from an enterprise perspective. So as a DevOps coach or a DevOps transformation leader, whoever you are, whatever your role is, it is about thinking more from a systems perspective, systemically across the enterprise, to visualize the end-to-end business process to which the scope that you are looking to transform aligns to. I hope, Gargi, I have answered your question. And Siddharth comes with second question. What are the key benefits and ROI that organizations can expect? I think I talked about that. The key benefit is you can see a clear increment in the business objectives maximization. That is definitely one of the benefit that you can see, right? And because you are trying to bring in uh, DevOps, usually you would see cloud as a prerequisite for DevOps transformation, because that gives you the ability to have greater autonomy for the teams. That means from overall, the impact that you would create through biz DevOps approach is a enhanced business outcome, and also the ability for the organization to adapt faster to the market changes if there are any, right? That means you are improving the business agility of the organization overall by aligning to the business objectives. So those are the key benefits. Apart from, of course, I talked about the systems thinking mindset that you would bring in the organization. That means everybody in the organization would be more thinking from an enterprise perspective than the siloed focus they would have, and also the motivation levels of the people. So apart from that, the greater add-on is also the business objectives.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Nivati.
Thank you, Alec. If there are any other
see.
questions,
We've got a
probably
couple of
we'll
minutes
just
left.
give a minute. Yeah.
So, I had a question actually. What are the biggest pitfalls in this? Do you think? Are there any tips for sort of avoiding pitfalls, particularly for large organizations?
Yes, in the large organizations, one of the pitfalls is more going by the leadership influence, not going by the priorities at an enterprise level, which can easily happen because there will be a lot of power play in the system, which we usually visualize. So do not fall into the trap of being pulled apart by the power influence in the organization, and try to focus more on the strategic priorities than uh, people preferences. That is one of the pitfalls we can easily get into.
So politics can be a problem in a big organization, you feel?
Yes, because in big organizations, it's more the ability to visualize the organizational dynamics and navigate through that is the bigger challenge overall, like from my experience. So that skill is very much essential when you're getting into big organizations.
Excellent. Well, Nivati, thank you, and thanks for the questions, everyone, at the end. That was a really good session, a lot of content there, so very much appreciated. And I hope you can stay around and enjoy the rest of the day. So we're absolutely perfect for time. So we'll be starting the next session in a few moments, which is on high impact leadership mantras in an agile world. So
Okay,
Nivati,
thank you,
again,
Alec. Thanks,
thank you very
everyone. Bye.
much. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining our next session. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our next presenter, who's Shrikala Sundararajan. Shrikala is a senior corporate leader and also founder of Purple Road Ventures and Shakti Leadership Academy. And she's going to be presenting today on high impact leadership mantras in an agile world. So Shrikala, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. And good morning, everybody. It's absolutely always a pleasure to be at Unicom, simply because of the kind of reachability, the kind of approachability they have with the gamut of topics, as well as the kind of people on board to actually get the whole thing going. So my talk today is going to be on something that the whole world is actually opening up to. Normally, leadership was looked at as a very, very administrative thing, as a very, as something that was just needed to get the business going. But we are now in times where the world has changed. And my thoughts today are about this new age leadership and how one should be embracing it, and how all of us here, all of you who are looking to be leaders, should actually evaluate it from a very different mindset, possibly, to make the best use of leadership. So I'm going to take a moment to share my screen, and obviously give me a thumbs up or a chat thumbs up once you can see my screen. Are we good? Okay, awesome, very good. So the first thing I'm going to actually call out is that, like I said, we are in different times where the whole world is looking at leadership in a very, very different way. And how has this actually transitioned? If you actually see, from a very, very, from a perspective of even talking about leadership, people are now wearing different hats, people are now wearing different perspectives. And the one thing that has actually happened is that people are looking at leadership no longer the way they used to look at it even just a few years ago. There are three things that have very, very predominantly changed when you talk of leadership. The first thing is that it has moved from a very, very administrative presence to enablement. A few years ago, if you actually see, leadership was looked at as something that keeps things going. You know, it's like oiling the machine. It's a support framework in which the leader actually just puts things in place and expects everybody to follow things to the T. But in the new world, in today's world where things are remote, things are agile, things are dynamic by nature, it is so important that the leader becomes an enabler versus just somebody who's pointing people towards a certain thing, right? So the leader has to have the ability to enable his people, to enable his department, to enable his culture in the organization, to make sure that the outcomes are reached. The second thing is that it has moved from being a very directional style of leadership to a very consolidation based of leadership. When was the last time you actually heard a leader say, listen, I don't care what you say, but do it my way? And then the team just went about and did it very, very heartfully. Quite some time ago. We've moved from there, from where just from taking directions, especially in the agile world, the leader just becomes an absolute enabler, like how we heard in the previous case, but it also becomes where the leader is expected to connect multiple stuff, which we will see in the slides that follow, into somebody who's able to consolidate information in the right way, is able to consolidate people the right way, is able to consolidate ideas in the right way, and then take it towards actioning. Therefore, it is no longer a style that will work, which is my way or highway, but it is more a consolidation-based approach that has entered into our lives as leadership. The third big change that we have seen is that this has changed from becoming a very, very activity-based ecosystem to a very, very outcome-based ecosystem. Especially in the agile world, you will notice that it is more about reaching a certain outcome versus just telling me how many test cases you've run or how many lines of code you've written. If you've executed 100 test cases, but you still haven't covered the feature that you're expected to cover in that particular sprint, the whole thing falls flat. In one way, very rightly, most of the world says that busyness is the new stupidity. And yes, that's exactly what has happened even with leadership. We are past the time when leaders say, oh, I'm so busy for everything, but you're expected to show what that busyness is actually leading out into. Right? Team members, employees, the organization is now looking to hear as a leader what outcome you bring to the table, what results you bring to the table, versus just listing out those 100 things that you tactically want to do. In short, I would say, summarizing the three of it, we've moved from a very, very operational based leadership to a very, very strategic driven leadership. And this is actually good news, especially since we are in a fast world. It is required to pause and reflect why we are doing what we are doing. And that is what strategic leadership is all about, which is very, very relevant for today. I'm here to pause and give you a reality check. The truth is that just 5% of business implement leadership development initiatives, although 83% of them strongly believe that it is needed. And what's your bottom layer saying? The bottom layer is saying that 48% of their employees look at their leadership as pretty much low quality, which basically means we have a very strong divide, a very strong gap on leadership quality. The top also know that the quality is possibly not there because they're not doing anything about it. The bottom of the organization also know that, hey, who I'm looking up to is not really that inspirational. In such a scenario, in forums like these, in conversations like these, it is so important to call out how leadership can actually be an enabler, can actually be outcome driven, and can actually be something that stitches dots together. And I used the opportunity today to present to you 3 mantras, which I strongly believe can establish one as a very, very strong leader in their organization and in their teams flowing down the channel. To get to those 3 mantras, there are 3 pivots that I want to base my thought process on, and I invite you to actually think of it. The whole world in the new age has moved towards just these 3 things. If you notice, any project success that you actually want to talk about, you will see that it comes about in either one of these things, or all of these things, or in combinations. And what are we talking about? We're specifically talking about the first thing, which is simplicity. Listen, it's as simple as this. The simpler your leadership, the better your team. The more simple you keep your approaches, the more doable, the more realistic you keep your whole approach of leadership without multiple layers for no reason, you realize that your team is way better in the way they interact with you, in the way they become brand ambassadors of the work that you do. And when I say you, it is you and your the deliverables of your entire team. So that's the pivot number 1. Pivot number 2 is speed. We're living in a world where technology is changing every 3 months. The moment somebody bases out their business on tools and techniques, you will see that it falls flat. As long as the why is very clear here, you'll realize that speed automatically comes in. We are far from a world which only focused on perfection as part of their GTM strategy, versus somebody who understands the value of hitting the market first. And therefore, that is my second pivot. The third pivot is very, very crucial in a world where almost everything can be automated, including stuff telling me how I can write script for this particular presentation. The one thing that differentiates is the people quotient, which I call here as PQ. The truth is, as a leader, the more approachable you are, the higher your people deliver. Just look at LinkedIn. You will realize that there are tons of posts actually talking about how people work for their managers after a point of time, and not just the organization. Which basically means that if you are somebody with a high people quotient, if you are somebody who can connect to your people very well, if you are somebody who is just so accessible by your people, you will realize that your people will jump boundaries to make sure they deliver all those goals that you all want to achieve as a team. And therefore, the mantras that you're about to see in the next couple of slides is heavily going to focus on this philosophy that I call the SSP framework. My first mantra for today is about knowing your people and the process. Now you will ask me, Shrikala, what's rocket science about it? But come to think about it, in a world where almost everything can be automated at work, including the lines of code that you write or the test cases that you test, what differentiates a high-performing, self-organized team from one that constantly requires, checks and interventions? It is the ability of the leader to understand how the marriage of people and processes can be done. It is so important for leaders to just not know what is the status report of your particular product execution, but it is so important to understand who are the people and how they are contributing into the whole process. Because if this is not done, how will you actually leverage somebody's strengths and weaknesses? Now, this is an area that leaders fall flat on the face. In my years of coaching leaders, the one thing I've realized is that a lot of people, especially in the tech industry, they understand their product very well. They know exactly the workflows. They know exactly the processes that will break. They know exactly the stuff that needs to be done, but they fall flat when it comes to the people who are doing it. And this is where things tend to crumple and fall flat. Which basically takes me to my next point, is that as a leader, it is so critical for you to be hands-on with your project blockers. We are past the time where even as a scrum master, you can just say, yeah, I've taken down your impediment and I will talk to this person to resolve it. Sometimes you need to be there when the troubleshooting is happening, because that is what gives out a very, very strong message to your team on how involved you are, how much you have their back into actually solving the problems. Remember the PQ quotient? And the third thing is about using tools to make people's life easier and not just busier. I can't tell you the number of times as a test manager, people tell me, oh, I don't want to be doing this documentation simply because it takes me 5 times more time to document about a particular test case than actually execute it. Why are we doing this? Because people have never asked, the tools that we are using at work or the tools that we intended to use to make lives better, is it really doing it or not? You very often identify a test management tool, a project management tool, and you just go about and doing it. And here's the bad news, just to make your mornings a little more spicier. The bad news is that a lot of people, other than the ones who are tracking the project, actively tracking the project, which is either your scrum master or the project manager or the delivery leader, now none of them actually open these tools to look at the documentation work. Now you may ask me, Shrikala, why should I do it? I have nothing to do with it. Hey, in a world that we're talking, where we're going to be reusing platforms, where we're reusing code, where we're using technology, when all of this is happening, how can you not look at what your peers are doing in the same organization, right? So as a leader, it is very, very important that you actually know your people and the process equally well. And this is leadership mantra number 1. We're past the times when people say, I'm a very technical person and technical career path is the only thing that I want to do, or I'm very good with people and people management is all that I want to do. We've moved into an absolute techno-managerial world where all the leaders out there are expected to be equally competent in both areas. So if you want to be one of those top leaders, know that this has to be your mantra from day 1. I'm going to pause and check my chat to check if there are any questions on mantra number 1. Absolutely. Oh, Naveen, you're here. Very nice to hear you. Your first comment says, yes, tools don't have a brain. User's brain is a tool's brain. And yes, absolutely. With a fool is a waste. And I completely agree. Naveen is one person who strongly advocates the presence of how one should be thinking about the agile mindset. And this is such a brilliant perspective brought out by Naveen as well. Moving on to the next mantra. Mantra number 2 is the CCC. And I'll tell you personally as a leader, this is something that I vouch for as a strong trump card for success. The first C is about connection. What are you connecting? Connect the dots. As a leader, systems thinking is something that should come about to you very, very naturally over a period of time. Systems thinking is where you are able to connect between multiple thought processes, multiple products, multiple ecosystems to arrive at what works best the most effectively, and the most efficiently. So the first thing you should be able to do is to connect the dots both between people and processes towards the work that you do. The second C is for contact. Like I already mentioned, we are in a world of collaboration and integration. When you're looking to integrate a lot of work that we do, this could be test cases, this could be platforms that you develop to run over your multiple test cases, this could be platforms of code that you use to actually customize products that you offer to various customers, as services. The truth is collaboration is key. And that can only happen when there is a strong contact put in place with all these systems. This contact could be contact tools, contact people, contact processes, contact systems. But the idea is only when there are touch points or there is a forum for touch base the whole thing that you actually can create something that is extremely efficient and extremely effective as products. In a world where innovation is supposed to be the in thing to survive, your USP, even if it just has collaboration, you're automatically hitting an easier and a faster GTM strategy. The third thing is construct. As a leader, it is so important for you to be extremely constructive in your solutions versus just being disruptive. I'm all for disruption. I'm all for disruption and innovation and technology. But as a leader, you need to know the fine line between disruption and being disengaging. You need to understand the dynamics of being a pain versus a gain. And the gain will only happen if your criticism, if your reviews, if your analysis, if your systems thinking is constructive by nature and not destructive by nature. Therefore, the CCC mantra is all about connecting the dots, bringing about collaboration, and being extremely constructive in your approach. I'm going to ask you all in the audience, what was the most constructive thing that you've done which shows your leadership abilities in the work that you do? Go ahead and let me know on the chat. And I'm actually looking at the chat to see what has been the most constructive thing that you've done in the last few months, last few years, to actually call out and be this constructive leader that you are. Now, when I say leader, it doesn't mean you have to manage a team of 25 people. Even if you're an individual contributor, you can actually demonstrate leadership in everything that you do. Excellent. So as I wait for your, Asit says, improve the collaboration within teams. Brilliant. Naveen says, make people realize the reality of life. Beautiful. Fantastic. Excellent. So if you realize, Asit and Naveen being our classic brilliant examples here, you will notice that there is so much more freedom in leadership if you can actually be constructive, if you can bring about people together and empower them to do things versus just be an absolute control freak in the office. My third mantra is a style that I call as goalpost leadership. I'm very sure you've watched at least one football match in your life. And if you haven't, you must have at least watched the India-Pakistan match that happened about just last evening here at Bangalore. Now, the truth is that the goalkeeper is only focused on keeping the goal, which means the sole purpose of the goalkeeper is to protect the goalpost from a ball that's coming in. The goalkeeper is not going in for offense. The goalkeeper is not going in for defense. The goalkeeper is not going into center strides, and all of these things. So the goalkeeper is extremely focused on keeping the goal. And this is the kind of leadership that leaders have to show in today's times.
Just 10-minute reminder.
Absolutely. Noted, Alec, on track. So if you are a goalkeeper, if you are a goalkeeper leader, you will know that your job is to protect your team from downfalls. You will know that your job is to not protect yourself there at that point of time, but to do what it takes to make sure that your team is reaching their goals by saving out goals that are not needed out for them. This goalpost leadership gives your team enough amount of freedom for them to uncover their own skills, their own strategies, their own ways of working, and thereby give them the kind of commitment to own up their actions as well. So you will realize that if you are a goalpost leader, you are actually at peace that you don't have to micromanage. And in fact, we are done with the era of micromanaging managers, isn't it? Today's world is the style of being macro managers. As macro managers, you have the overall post of how the match is going on. You're goalkeeping, but at the same time, you're not intruding into how every single person has to be playing their stroke and their stride. The third thing, which, and I like to conclude this with a little story of what my teacher told me when I was in class 9. In class 9, I had actually failed the subject of chemistry in my second term, the midterm exams that we have. Being a very intelligent student by nature, it was a little scary for me because my confidence was hit. And at the same time, it was new because chemistry is a subject I thought I loved, but hey, what? The mark said something else. So my teacher, and I fondly remember her as Mrs. Solomon, I remember she telling me this. She said, Shrikala, keep your focus on the goal. When you play football, you don't keep your focus on all the other players who are coming on your way to stop you from playing. All you do is to keep dribbling the ball and take it towards your goalpost. So keep your vision fixed on the goal. This story has stayed with me for life. If as a leader, your vision is fixed about what you want to achieve, you will realize that you will not focus on the smaller obstacles that come your way, which could be your stakeholders being upset, it could mean your team members making mistakes, it could be your own decision failures, but you will keep your vision fixed and you will be able to pick yourself up when you or your team fall towards them achieving what they want to achieve. With this, I conclude and open the floor for questions from you on the 3 mantras that I have, or the 3 pivots that I have actually shared about.
Well, thank you, Shrikala. Really dynamic presentation. And we'll just wait for some questions to come in the chat. Actually, I had a question for you. Something maybe slightly off topic. I was thinking back to because it was about a year ago when Elon Musk took over Twitter. And it seemed to me, just as an observer, that he had to make very quick, very rapid changes. And it was almost like he's pressing a reset button and completely changing the culture in the organization. I mean, do you think, one, is that valid? And is that something that can work? Maybe, and have you seen it in other organizations?
Absolutely. So one of the first things that, of course, Elon Musk did was to change where it mattered the most. Look, you can't make changes in an organization which is that big if the leadership is going in different directions. It's like, riding a chariot with 7 horses, but all 7 going in their own directions, right? So at sometimes, of course, this is not very particular to whether it was right or wrong, but whether it was possibly needed at that point of time, right? So yes, leadership styles need to vary. I'm not an advocate for dictatorial type of leaderships ever. But that said, there has to be alignment in senior leadership if an organization's direction needs to be focused. So if everybody was aligned, then maybe there's no change in leadership. But if not, then a change in leadership is a very, very natural phenomenon to actually happen in organizations.
Thank you. That's interesting. You'll see we've got a couple of questions coming in. First one is from Aftab. What strategies can leaders employ to foster innovation and creativity within teams?
Awesome. Thank you, Aftab, for that question. And I can tell you a couple of them that I've personally deployed in my experience. One of the first things is to have ecosystems set up for collaboration, right? So innovation and creativity comes when people are allowed to make mistakes, right? If somebody is under pressure, people are not going to be creative because they're going to take the safe ways of actually doing things versus attempting something new. I remember in one of my past organizations, we actually had this event called Goofathon, where people talk in front of the entire department of 300 people about what they goofed up on. And few Goofathons later, we realized that the culture in the department had changed towards being open with what they goofed up on, and therefore they were willing to learn from each other and try out new things. So one is to create that space, that forum where people can actually do it. Two is, as a leadership, ensuring psychological safety of your employees can actually foster innovation. Because then you know that people are going to get creative. They're going to come about and possibly collaborate with people who they wouldn't collaborate at other times if they feel absolutely safe about it. So if you can create a culture where employees are not going to be judged for everything, if employees are encouraged to fail, then you've automatically created an ecosystem that fosters innovation and creativity in people. Yeah.
I can see quite a few questions coming in. Another one is, what are the most effective approaches for leaders to develop and mentor the next generation of leaders? This is from Gargi.
Yeah, lovely question, Gargi. The one thing that I personally see, even when I coach top leaders and senior management leaders, is an area that requires people to listen. A leader needs to be a strong listener to develop and mentor the next gen of leaders, because we need to understand that we don't use the same phone we used even 5 years ago. My kids used a far more advanced phone than what I used possibly even say 10 years ago. Of course, those phones didn't exist, right? But the reason that happens is because when with time changing so fast, with technology moving in so fast, it is very, very important for people to be absolutely abreast with newer leadership styles. And that can only happen if the leader who is looking to foster the next generation, to looking to mentor the next generation, becomes a brilliant listener. And as a mentor and a coach myself, I've seen that the more I listen, the more people are willing to mold themselves into what is adaptable. So if you want to mentor the next gen of leaders, there's one thing that you need to do is be a fantastic listener. The second thing is let go. Control freaks, this is not the world for you, right? You need to let go of things that you can't seem to relate with or connect with. You know, there is one thing that we call as experience and the other thing that we call as baggage. Now, both could be about 2 decades old, but if it's baggage, you will carry it on your shoulders and actually stifle every single team member out there. But if it's experience, you will bring about that wealth, but then fine tune it according to what is needed for today's times. And you will see that leaders who don't mentor people are those with baggage. And you will see leaders who actually who give birth to more leaders are the ones who actually talk from experience. So just these 2 factors, let go and listen out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shrikala. Much appreciated. I can see there's an interesting comment just to round things up, because we're almost at the end, from Naveen. He's saying, I always say this: when things go wrong, if the management and team can smile and say, thank God, only this much is wrong, then they're positive towards creative culture and innovative.
Yeah,
I think that's a good comment.
Absolutely brilliant. Lovely comment, Naveen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So with that, I think we're pretty much at the end. We're spot on for time. So thank you, Shrikala, and thanks everyone for some great questions at the end. We'll now move on to the next session, which is on, is there a golden ratio, number of test specialists per development specialist in an agile team? See you in the next session. Thanks, Shrikala. Hello, everybody. Welcome back again. I'd like to introduce our next presenter, who is Debashish Banerjee, Senior Director at Walmart India. And he's going to be talking to us today on, it's an interesting topic, is there a golden ratio, number of test specialists per development specialists in an agile team? It's the same format as before. There'll be hopefully opportunity for time for Q&A at the end. So I will now hand over to Debashish.
Sure. Thanks, Alec. And it's been a very interesting morning. So I'll just share my slide and then we can. Okay. Okay. Can someone please confirm?
That looks good. That looks perfect.
Okay, great. So Today, I think I was attending some of the prior sessions, and I heard Shri Kala talk about something called as being a macro leader. So obviously, one part of leadership is really also about structuring your team, right? I think she was talking about something I found interesting called PQ, and making sure you're connected to the people. So one part of structuring the team right is obviously to have the right cross-functional team, whether it is a development engineer, a test specialist, project managers, product managers, or any other kind of role that may be required. So today we'll be talking broadly about the proposed ratio of a test specialist to a developer in an agile team. And we'll see if there is a consensus or even thoughts around what could be a good ratio based on various factors. So we'll call it the golden ratio. If you know mathematics, there is something called as a golden ratio, which exists in nature. It exists in architecture, in both in biology, mathematics, and all the other places. So we'll see if does a 1.618 really exist in the context of this ratio. So a few things just to set context. We will, of course, look at one version of what an agile team could be. We will look at it in the context of the ratio of 4 ratios. Of course, these might not all be the only kind of ratios possible. And what I'm hoping is that during the course of this, I would expect that I would request anyone who thinks that there is a different way of or a different ratio, or where you have used this ratio in a different way, to please put it in, because that way we can all learn from each other. The third thing we will also talk about is what I would talk in terms of a little bit of a framework of what I call observed decision factors, which give some kind of guiding factor on when to choose one ratio versus the other. And if you have come across a different decision factor, please do add on, and we'll take a few takeaways and carry on. Yeah, please feel free to put in questions in between, and we can obviously take them in the end. There are, of course, various versions of Agile. The context that we are talking in, we will assume that, let us say, it's more closer to a Scrum team consisting of some sort of development specialists, test specialists, which could be manual or QA automation. Typically nowadays, of course, a lot of it is merged into one kind of role. We will assume some sort of a Scrum Master, a product owner, a sort of a more appropriate kind of a Scrum team. There may be functional roles like, let's say, performance and documentation, localization kind of roles. And of course, there are key stakeholders such as people managers, business owners. There may be additional roles in general, but what some of these, when the ratio broadly makes an assumption that this is a singular team, which is essentially developers and test specialists looking at it as one unit which works together to deliver a product, a platform, or any kind of a outcome. So what are the 4 ratios that we would possibly look at? I would say one, and this is where I would encourage this group to possibly think in terms of where you use any of these ratios. Before I call them out, I would say, like, I would want you to spend 5 seconds and think, where would you have seen a example where, let us say, you had 2 or say even more test specialists to one developer? So take a few seconds and see if anyone wants to write into the chat. We'll look at it and see what we can learn from each other. So this is where you're extremely test heavy. You have much lesser developers. The other ratio we look at it is the reverse, which means that I want you to think in the terms, where could you see that the test specialists as a individual role doesn't really exist, but you're only talking about a scenario where you have only developers into the mix. In fact, you might even say that it is it is almost merged, that there is no separate role itself of a developer or a test specialist. The third one would be where it would be more of a 1:1, where you could talk in the context that now let us say you have the equal number of test specialists and developers. So I want you to think where might you have come across? And while we don't have a poll or a quiz, I'm hoping that in your mental model, I would request you to think what example you could come up with. And the fourth one, of course, is another extreme, which is while the test specialist as a role does exist, but you have a much larger number of developers. And now the challenge would come in terms of the test specialist having to support the outcomes and sign off of a large number of developers. So that's the four contexts that we will discuss in. Of course, these are continuous numbers, so you could have one or the other. So in some examples that that I have seen this work, and I would encourage you to say where it worked for you, is first in terms of 0 to 0 test specialist. Often I would have seen that this kind of a scenario works very early into the life cycle of a product, a company, a project. Often in the, I would say even in the context that where you might not even have a defined scenario of what you are going to build. There may be multiple hows. For example, like let us say that if you look at a typical hackathon, right, which happens in so many of our companies, you might find that often hackathon teams, while they are encouraged to be cross-functional, are often a couple of coders, developers coming together and trying to do a hack, getting it there. And even in a sense, I would say every hackathon is also somewhere seeking additional funding, right? Because often you want to get it into the product or a roadmap or some sort of a priority queue. So you just extend that into a early part of a product, or even a company which is trying to, let's say, we heard Shrikala talk about GTM, right? Where you're not even maybe thought completely about your GTM. So a greenfield kind of work is one example where you might even leave a couple of developers alone to sort of take a white paper, take a hackathon, build something, present back to leadership, senior leadership. This is also an excellent opportunity where if you have certain companies which might have, let's say, the 5%, 10% extra time, these are excellent places where people with high energy can come in and build with no defined test specialist role. The second one, I would go on the complete other spectrum, which is on the technology infrastructure movement, right? Which is while that is one example, often what may happen is you sort of know a scripted way of moving something, say, from let's say one data store or a data type to another one. The scripts exist, the method exists, you're doing it for various reasons. You might have a lot of the development already done, or you might have a scenario where it is far more important to validate the data, take it forward. The other case where it might be extremely important is that now let us say these are high, while every application has an impact, but let us say some applications have greater mission critical or high potential for, let us say, loss of life, or say a loss of or extremely high security kind of thing. There you might want to have a greater number of test specialists in order to make sure that even if it's a small change, there is no let us say untoward incident. Like, for example, I will not name a specific example, but you can imagine what a small defect on a let us say something like an aeroplane or let us say at this point, there is a lot of discussion about a submarine under the water not being found can have, while I'm not implying there is a defect, but you can imagine that the impact of that is much bigger than, let us say, us going to a website and let's say it crashes for a few seconds, or it's a few seconds slow. Even that is not a good thing, but then obviously loss of life is a greater impact in this. The third one, which I would talk a little bit about, is of course the 1:1 ratio, right? Which is often you would find some examples of this could be where, let us say, you have to physically test a lot of devices. Now, let us say you're testing a router, you're testing a phone. Maybe some of them are new. Maybe some of them have phones right from all classes, let us say feature phones to smartphones. Maybe it's a common functionality. Maybe there are routers of various types. Some may have emulators or simulators. Some may not have emulators or simulators. In which case, what you might have is a steady number of, it is almost a matrix of how many devices and what you are testing, and a function of physical devices do play a factor in terms of needing to do that. Now comes the fourth ratio, I would say, which is the 8:1. Many teams do use this ratio. Sometimes within a Scrum team, you might have one test specialist, and often I would say that this works very well where it's extremely highly automated, small rapid increments, and this test specialist is almost like a partner to the developers. And the only way this really works is if you have if you're having extremely high amount of like a automation, you can also have a scenario where the developers run a lot of pass before you get into the get the test specialist who may sort of look at it from either an end-to-end perspective or not. The other thing, of course, that comes is as you bring these all together, on the overall level, there may be other QA functions that may be present, which may take this and take it forward. So these are sort of four. Before I go to the framework, I want to just give a few seconds for everyone to just think. These are 4 examples where you could move from one. Literally, you can think if you went from the analogy of of a product life cycle or a company's life cycle, I'm sure you can find enough amount of correlation with what you are doing or what you may a challenge you may need to face. And what I'm hoping in the next 5-7 minutes is to sort of share a few of the frameworks to evolve this. Okay, so obviously one we talked about is the type of product. Where it's a greenfield hack. Second, 1:1 is much more of a device heavy, a much more lower tolerance for error. The 8:1 can be more of a highly automated, a technology service. 1:2 is more of a validation and less of code. Okay. This one is, I think, really extremely critical. I know as we move into various kinds of products, and I would say it is not, if it is even better than you would have very strong need for unit tests. You would have very strong need for the functional tests, the higher the ratio you go. And whether it is in terms of the integration of the components or whether it is in terms of, and I would say testing is not just a context of unit or integration, or even I would say even some kind of validation from the requirement, or even if you think in terms of smoke testing, deployment testing, post-deployment testing, or acceptance testing, all of these are extremely important. One other thing that really comes is while I would say the industry has moved towards a lot in terms of the skill and the programming skills of test engineers. As you vary across these ratios, you would find that it is very important to train and retrain our engineers. Let us say if you're using Java, to do your test automation, to look at those skills. And because if you don't have the skills, there is not much use in terms of varying the ratio in the context of, let's say it's high in the high automation, high amount of programming skills, to let us say in the context of something different. Of course, in a greenfield project or a product, the automation might not be the immediate focus at that point, because you're trying to sort of get funding. Specialized skills, and I know there is a session following on artificial intelligence. There may be the factor of what you're testing is also an important thing in the context of what ratio you use. Now, let us say the skill is extremely specialized, which requires a certain kind of, let us say, a device which is used in the context of a manufacturing plant, or let us say it is a device which requires a simulator to be driven. So it might need a lot more specialization as for others. So in which case, the fungibility of the test specialist is probably a lot lower. And you may need to consider that as a factor and work backwards when you decide on the ratio. Co-location to me is extremely important part. I know we were talking about leadership and distribute, and especially in the context of COVID, this has become extremely important. And this post-COVID world, there is companies that are using various mechanisms for employee engagement. Some are fully remote, some are a mix, some are fully co-located. So at least in my view, the distributed model tends to work better when you have a better amount of ratios. When you have, say, no testers or a very high number of one kind of function, co-located tends to be better. In general, of course, collaboration is a key, but in general, Scrum team co-location is an important thing, because what you don't want to be left with is, let us say, while gig economy is quite popular these days, you don't want to be completely left with a scenario where let's say one test engineer is in region X and the other one is, and every 4 developers are in 4 hours away, and the other developers are, let's say, 12 hours away. You want to make sure that a right scenario is available. Okay. This one is, I think, very important also when you decide, and we probably haven't talked as much about it yet, which is in terms of ownership, right? Now, does the team own the component itself from an end-to-end? For example, if you see, when I'm building a hack or when I want to get funding for some small thing, everything from writing the first import statement to let us say even doing demos, or even possibly even talking of it like a sales pitch to potential customers under NDA, or even putting something for testing, everything you own. So there is a very high.
Sorry, we've just got 10 minutes left, just a reminder.
Sure. So that's a very better when you want to have one unit. Typically, when you have higher amount of dev test ratio, you might even have a specialized set. Like, for example, we talked about the infrastructure set, multiple Scrum teams, and you have a Scrum or Scrum. And like I said, when you have more tests, it is possible that you might need a separate horizontal QA function, which does some of it, but you still need to bring in the agility of one team. Role fungibility is extremely important. This is important whether you're in the scale of, let's say, your company, your, let's say, product, line of business or any other context. Typically, you would want higher skilled, more fungible skills when you need fungibility to be a factor. When you don't need it to be a factor, it is definitely where you can play around a little bit with the numbers too. Nature of deployment, obviously, lesser testers, you want to give smaller increments, highly automated. You want to have defined phase rollouts when you have far more number of testers, probably a little more structured or known. When none, you would possibly do a little bit of A/B, have it in buckets, and so on. Test tool availability, of course, you need to be highly tooled, highly automated when you have lesser in terms of a function. Lesser when, let's say, you're doing a startup or let's say you're sort of pitching your hack idea for funding. Quality gate criteria is obviously the stringency can vary when you have lesser of one kind of function. While quality is not a factor of compromise, but you might vary your stringency depending on whether you're pitching for something or whether it is something going into, let us say, a mission critical application. And finally, funding. Typically, you would find when you are not having one and it's a very small team, could be undefined funding, asking for funding in order to moving to a more steady state funding. And you have to also consider a case where, let us say, funding is under stress. And finally, job descriptions. What you need could be evolving based on what you build. Typically, when you have none or very small number, it could be an evolving job description. And yeah, and the org structure, we talked about single or separate orgs. So yeah, to summarize, I would say three, should it matter? And in my view, it depends on the scenario. You could talk in terms of role agnostic teams. You could talk in terms of how you track it and ensure that you're appropriately getting the outcome. I think Shrikala was talking about outcome and not hours. And in order to achieve it, it's important to talk in the context of training and skill development, expectation management, career, and creating a phased approach. So you have to bring in both the project, product, and the people side into this. So yeah, if you had to sort of carry a few insights away, it can be higher sometimes in agile development, smaller increments. You can have specializations, but not role descriptions, and vary the ratio. And of course, you can focus on it to speed up an agile adoption and use techniques such as crowd testing, dog fooding, where you might not have the role within the team, but you might have other aspects to bring it up. So yeah, so hopefully this gave you some food for thought, and I think at 5 minutes or so, if there are any comments or questions, happy to take.
Okay, well, thanks to Bashish. That was a great presentation, and I can see it's certainly been thought-provoking. There's some feedback and comments in the chat. So I don't know how you'd like to take it. Do you want to have a look at the comments and then maybe a comment on them? I think there's a question from Santosh as well that's coming at the end.
Yeah,
related.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you. I can see this is really good to see so much of thought. So I'll work from backwards. How has the ratio evolved over time? Is it fixed, or have we observed fluctuations? Yes, I would say the ratio itself has not evolved over time, but it evolves, like we said, on the type of scenario of your company, product, or project. Santosh asked, do you believe you have experienced a scenario where someone in the test team does not feel good about the ratio? Yes, absolutely. And that is where the managing expectation has to be dealt with. How do you deal with them? We have to talk in the context of how this individual needs to sort of expand as being part of the building of the product than just thinking that they are we have all moved from the manual testing to an automated testing to possibly testing being even done through AI and things like that. So how do you deal with it? You set expectations, you reskill, and you also give a career path to those associates. or people that you work with. I believe in balancing throughput. Okay, that's great thought, Naveen. Weakness, collaboration +1. Early thoughts, quick points. Santosh again, diversity in thinking, knowledge. I think really a very good thought. There should be no ratio. Exactly. I mean, and that's exactly where it is. You just use what is needed based on the scenario. The ratios are a factor of what you need for that point. Just a craft. And again, Santosh, thank you, Santosh. You really have added quite a few things. Gaurav, how do you think the ratio is getting impacted with multi-skilled engineers compared to single-skilled engineers? Yeah, in fact, that's exactly where Gaurav, I would look in terms of you actually have a lot of flexibility in the context of how you build your team. If engineers are not really have an ability to do everything from unit test to performance test and are able to build it into the system and the code, I would say you are no longer talking of a specialist, but you're talking of a team which is getting something done. So the ratio will go lower and lower. But again, you may need to change it based on, let us say, whether you're what you're testing. But yeah, good question, Gaurav. Any other comments or questions? Anything that you want to bring up?
I think I'm just having a look through the comments. See, I think you've covered them all. Just have about a minute left if anybody has a very quick question. Otherwise, I think we're pretty much on time. Okay, I think we're almost on time now. So thank you very much, Debashis. It's a really thought-provoking presentation. I can see that from the questions that came in chat. So thank you again, much appreciated. We've got our next session coming up in a few moments, which is on how ChatGPT or AI and machine learning impacts the testing industry. Is this something that will complement or complicate? It's going to be an interesting session. That's starting in just a couple of minutes. So again, Debashis, thank you very much indeed. And I hope you can stay for the rest of the conference. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Before the break, I'm really pleased to introduce Kiran Rayachoti, who's Vice President of Engineering at Publicis Sapient. And I'm really very excited about this presentation. It's on how ChatGPT or AI and ML impacts testing industry. Is this something that will complement or complicate? We recently had Unicom had a conference in London almost just exactly a month ago, 25th of May. And this is something, the whole day that came up, a lot of people were discussing it during the breaks. It's a really hot topic right now. So I'm really interested to hear your talk. So Kiran, I will hand over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Alec. And thanks Unicom for having me on this forum. I'm going to share my screen first. Let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Looks fine.
Okay. Thanks everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, or whichever the geography you're in, right? So hi everyone, and thanks for joining this session. So what actually I'm going to cover today's session is about how the generative AI, right? So or rather the ChatGPT is the very common word now, right? Going to impact the testing industry, right? So that's what actually my topic will be. And and actually, right, so the reason actually I want to say whether it complement or complicate testing, so I'll explain when we go into the slides actually what is there in store, right? So for all the testing industry and also many of the aspiring testers, automation testers, and all the people from the domain. And let me just go to my quick introduction before I actually go into the slides. So Alec already called out, but I'm just a very quick snapshot. I have like close to 20 plus of years of experience in the testing domain. I've been worked with large brands across the world, right? So been in multiple geographies and did a lot of transformations from QA to QV for many organizations. right? So it's a brief about me, and I'm working on the current Gen AI as well in a couple of my projects, which is where I thought it's actually a good topic to discuss and just share what we are doing as well. So with that, right? So first of all, right, before actually I even go into the chat GPT, right? So I don't know how many of you know about Gen AI, which is generative AI, right? So because it's a pretty common word now. If you actually search in Google, this is the most searched keyword, right? Even than something like cloud or DevOps, right? Because if you actually look at cloud, DevOps, or data, these are the most popular words in actually, if you actually look at the Google search terms, because those are the popular terms for like quite some time, right? But if you actually look at now Gen AI, it is almost superseded almost all the other kind of hot topics in the market. And primarily the reason is because it's vast, the topic, and its impact is vast, right? So in a very simple terms, right? So Gen AI is nothing but a branch of artificial intelligence, you can actually say, right? Where it actually automatically generates not just the text, it generates even the music for you, it generates the content, it generates the images, it generates even the code, right? So that's where it got everybody's attention, because when it started generating the code, and that too in a more right, so close to accuracy, right, what we needed. That's the primary, right? So primary focus of the right intention of the Gen AI. And there are some actual examples of Gen AI, right? So because I don't want again people to get confused, Chat GPT is the only Gen AI in the market available, because I just want to give a little bit more right color on Gen AI, exactly what it is, right? It's actually been there in the market. It's not just first time we are seeing in Chat GPT. It's been already there. Like for example, whatever deepfake technologies you look at, right? So the natural language processing, or the, for example, the style GAN for images, right? Some of these things already there is a Gen AI, right? So, and there are some tools already in the market like TensorFlow. I think most of you would have heard, right? So we have done a project as well in TensorFlow, like kind of POC, not the full-fledged project. So TensorFlow, like PyTorch, right? So Magenta again is from Google, right? So there are some, these tools are already available. And in this space, now actually we got OpenAI's tools, which is ChatGPT, which became more popular, right? So, and again, I will explain why, what and why, right? If you actually look at ChatGPT, coming to our topic of discussion, right? So, and in ChatGPT is more advanced AI model, right? So which actually OpenAI actually released it to the market, right? In terms of deep learning, right? And in terms of generating the text, in terms of generating the text and the patterns, right? And the sources actually it gets it from, right? And it is very close to accuracy that we needed, and it is a more advanced, right? So I would say compared with all the other tools earlier, because TensorFlow and PyTorch and all actually more, they are holistic tools, they're more generalized tools, right? Not particularly to only conversation, but ChatGPT whereas focuses completely, right? So only on the conversation AI, right? So that's where it gets interest, because the response is almost equal to like a human like responses, right? And there are few things in ChatGPT, right? So if you quickly look at, right, so the important thing is your interaction with the ChatGPT is very important, which is why it is called prompt, right? We call it as a prompt, and this is a very big subject in the current world. If you actually look at, so the reason actually even I wanted to do a red circle there, because so you can actually see many courses on prompt engineering. If you go to actually any, I'm just type in Google prompt engineering, you will know how many courses are already there in the market, right? And prompt engineering is nothing but the input that you are giving to the ChatGPT. And the reason why this is more important is because if someone actually organization, let's say, decides to use ChatGPT in their right SDLC, right, or in their testing, then everyone cannot actually ask their own questions and right and use ChatGPT, because the way you are asking question, the ChatGPT response will change. Even a slight variation in your question might change completely the response, which is why the prompt engineering is very important. Everyone has to understand the prompt engineering and the RGC framework. So once you understand this, then you will become very savvy, right, to ask the questions to the ChatGPT and get the right responses that you needed, right? So, and everyone in the team will have the same understanding. So it is more like, you can say it's a kind of a standards or kind of language, that input that you are giving to ChatGPT, which is why this is more important. And how it actually, right, generates a very high level view I'm giving you here, right? So because just to understand what ChatGPT, once the user gives the prompt to the ChatGPT, then it actually breaks down into the tokens. So each token is processed either as a full word or as a subword, and that based on the token, right, it generates the response back. One interesting thing with ChatGPT is it maintains the context, right? So when I say it maintains the context, let's say I'm talking about an API automation, right? So I'm asking what is the best tool in the API automation. Let's say it comes back to me and says rest assured or like karate, right? And I will ask, okay, can you write a karate script for open API like a weather, right? So it actually gives me a karate script, which I no need to do any changes, right, for the open API. Right, that's the advantage actually we have, right? So it maintains the context, and within the same API context, you can ask so many questions. It will actually give you all relevant responses, right? So that is why actually it's a contextual as well, and the response it generates is based on the context. And again, why, right? So because like I said, PyTorch is there, like for example, TensorFlow is there. Why only ChatGPT is so popular right now, right? So because one, it's language capabilities, right, and ease of use, right? So anything ease of use gets popular very easy, and this is a classic example, right? So even though you have TensorFlow, PyTorch, which you can achieve maybe similar to this, not exactly like this, right? So why people hasn't used so much is because the ease of use. I mean, those all comes with a heavy baggage of right implementation, right? And the research and innovation that has been done in ChatGPT and the responses it comes, and it is trained actually the pre-training that is done at a large scale, right? You can actually try any kind of tool in the market, a script for a, right? Just an example, I'm saying, like if you want to write a Selenium script, you want to write a rest assured, you want to write even a Cypress, which is little again coming new in the market. So even Cypress scripts, it gives exactly with the syntax, right? So that's the advantage you have, which is why it's more popular, right? So and the impact on multiple use cases, right? Not just only one industry, it's actually impact on multiple use cases. So it is actually having a tremendous impact. And adding to that, right? So the OpenAI, right? The engagement, how they did it is very, very actually, right? So a very wonderful engagement they did with the community, because they actually given it ChatGPT 3.5 free for everyone open. They collected the feedback based on the responses. They are correcting on every day-to-day basis, the responses. And it is actually the way how the responses are coming now, it's actually very, very fascinating, right? So that's one of the reason as well, how they are engaging with the community is actually a very good way the way they did. And that's why actually, if you see, ChatGPT actually superseded almost all the other tools, right, in this space. So with that, right, so how it impacts the testing industry, right? So quickly, very quickly, right? So I want to just talk about how the testing industry actually coming from the last 3-4 decades or 3 decades probably. If you see till 2000, majority of the era, I would call it as a manual testing era, because of not much automation. So WinRunner was coming at the end of late 90s, but still it's majorly a manual testing era, right? Then you got a like a QTP in the market, right, or UFT, which became very popular, and most of the companies, most of the teams actually purchased the license and used the tool, and it was like almost like number one in the market, right? So during those days, like 2000 to 2007 days. And if you see, the trend actually got changing, right? Earlier it was like 10 years, any trend you have, it will stay for 10 years, but now the trend got to 7 years. And when it comes to the next 7 years, right, first, when it was QTP, it is all VB-based tools, people started using it. Then actually people started slowly moving towards Java, and Selenium, Vatir, and few other tools actually became very popular. So now it is a moderate automation era, right? I would say, because it's not still 100% people are able to do automation, but still they were trying to do. But one thing, actually good thing is, this era, what happened is many of them moved to open source tools, right? So till 2007-8, it was all commercial tools, but many actually moved towards the open source tools. That's a one good change, right, happened. After that, right, so actually even the other extended languages as well is popular, and majority of the focus now is DevOps and CI/CD pipeline, how we can actually have a pipeline based automation, right? So that user no need to actually do manual execution of manual event trigger of the automation suites. So the focus became more into the DevOps era, right? So it happened till before COVID. If you actually look at, most of the people are actually focused on DevOps and automation. Both together they used to talk, right, in many forums and talks. And also, right, and before COVID, if somebody, even till last year, right, I would say, if somebody doesn't know programming in QA, they actually used to actually see a little bit weird, right, to the person, because programming became the most premium skill, right? So in before COVID, right? So that's how the trend has been actually going on, right? And that's what even in the industry wants, the companies wanted. Everybody used to start assessing a lot of programming skills in the tester. I mean, forgetting their domain knowledge, right? So even people are not worried if somebody doesn't have a keyword domain knowledge, but they wanted only programming knowledge, right? So that is the kind of trend actually happened. But now if you see, the trend became actually 5 years trend now, right? So from 5 years, right now, again, we are now into 3 years trend now, because the world is changing so fast, right? So now from 10 to 7 to 5 to 3, now actually every 3 years you can actually see a trend. And now what is the actually the trend, right? Just till last year, if you actually look at, different kinds of automation is popular, right? So not just only web and UI, because that actually became a table stake. Now people are more doing on the backend data, different kinds of automation, right? So like, for example, within the non-functional as well, there is a lot of aspects came in, right? So people started actually focusing on wide coverage, right? So types of automation with the wide, again, tools as well, right? Tools, languages and all. Still the language is still the popular till last year, I would say. So people used to say that, okay, you need to have programming when you are a test engineer, right? And different kinds of programming and tools has been tried. But if you see from now to the next 3 years, right, what would happen? So this is actually my personal thought and prediction, right? So I mean, I researched obviously some of the market trends as well, right? So if you actually look at, I haven't put any language there, right? It's only the Gen AI, right? So are the right, the tools might not change, maybe the same might continue, but maybe Selenium will go down a little bit and Cypress will come up, or few other Playwright, like for example, another good tool is coming up, right? So these tools might actually come up, but in my opinion, tools and frameworks, right, so will come and go, right? So but I think the core skill is at the top one, what you are seeing in the other decades, and the coming decade would be the generative AI, right? Because generative AI is going to complement you as a programmer or as a buddy for you, right? So who actually help you, right? Who will help you, right, in making you more productive, in making your automation more scale, right? So that's what about the how the trend is happening, right, in the industry. And automation, just quick snapshot before I move to the next slide. So automation wise, right, so if you actually look at the metrics in the market at the moment, I mean, many people think, okay, I'm doing automation, my teams are doing automation, I know everybody is doing automation, right? So then automation is everywhere, right? But actually that's still an assumption, because I was under the same assumptions till the time I have looked at some of the metrics in the world report, right? The testing world report that gets every year, I go through the report and I make some extrapolations based on the numbers, and I actually aggregate the numbers. So if I actually look at, right, across the industry, still the industry hasn't crossed 40% automation for the functional automation, right? So but if anyone, if you ask, everybody say, oh, I'm doing 80%, I'm doing 90%, I'm already 100%, right? But if you look at across the industry, right, so we are still not beyond 40%. And most of the places API automation is not there, and wherever it is, it's across the industry. If you put together, it is not even crossing 25%, right? So the API automation. And the reason why automation adoption is slow, right, so there are few reasons, and I picked only the primary two reasons, right? So one is the inability to apply automation gaps has increased. So the reason why it is increased, right, so is one is the skill set, right? Majority of the times, the first and foremost reason is the skill set. Skill set, when I say it, again boils down to the programming knowledge of the tester, and also the tool knowledge and the hands-on knowledge, right? So now we have a complement, right, for that, right? Earlier it was all programming, right, we talked about. Now from programming again, right, so now you have a Gen AI, right? So where I'm not saying it is only single silver bullet where it will solve all the problems in the world, but it will complement you, right? So to write more faster code, to be more productive, so that the tester can actually focus on something else rather than figuring out, okay, how I write this library, right? So how I write this reusable library, how I can write a reusable function for a calendar, right? So instead of that, they can actually focus on something else more important on the strategy side, right? So, and if you see the another metric we got, 46% still doesn't have the automation skills that are required by the companies, right? So this is the data coming from the companies, right? So now I'm saying some of these gaps can be actually addressed, right, as a tactical option, right? I would still say these are all, Gen AI is a tactical option. It won't be a strategic option for now, but it will be still a tactical option, right? And coming to, right, so how it impacts the testing industry, right? So because we talked about a lot on Gen AI tools and testing industry, automation industry, but how it impacts, right? At a high level, if you look at, right, so we have requirements, we have a test design, we have a test data, we have execution, analysis, reporting, dashboards. This is the aerial view of any testing project you look at, right? Irrespective whether you're working on microservices, irrespective of whether you're working on, let's say, the UI front end, irrespective of you're working on packages like Salesforce, ADG, or a few other packages, or even ERP products like SAP, right? Even if you're working on any, let's say, big data projects, right? These phases will never change, right? But the way how you do in each phase might change, but these phases will never change. The percentages of these phases also most likely won't change, right? So where a tester will spend the time, right? So I have given both for manual and automation, so you can see how much the teams are spending, right? In some cases, it might be here and there, plus or 5% here and there, but majority, this is what is the trend, right? What I've seen in the last 20 years. If we actually see where Gen AI will impact, right? So because we need to know, because we cannot go blindly and say that, oh, I want to go and impact Gen AI and do everything else, right? Which is why we need to know where exactly it will impact and how much efficiency we are going to get back from the Gen AI. If I look at, right, from a requirement standpoint phase, it's a low impact, right? So you will not have much impact with Gen AI. If somebody telling you, oh, all my requirements will be written by Gen AI and I don't need to spend any time and I can just go and relax and have a cup of coffee, that's not true. So the impact is very low in requirement stage, right? So because still you need a human intervention when the requirements stage, right? So it still is required, but that's what the reason I said low impact is, it can take some of the advantages of like writing a test strategy. You don't need to write like 25 Word document pages test strategy, or you don't need to write like 15-20 slides of PPT. ChatGPT can definitely help you, right? So reducing those efforts, but still some intervention is required, right? And where is a high impact is the test design, right? So this is a fantastic area where we can actually have a wonderful impact, because I myself have seen in 2 of my projects where we have used this and we got the impact, we got the output, right? So in both either manual or automation, I mean, you're going to have a huge impact of using this, because it is going to complement you like one more resource almost, right? I would say, if I have to tell in a typical services language, so you will have an additional extra resource for, right, who will be helping for you while writing all the design. And design, when I say it's test case writing, both in manual and automation, coding as well comes in the design here. And test data also will have a high impact, but some exceptions would be the banking and financials, where you can't do much of the use of this. But otherwise, apart from those exceptions, but you will have a high impact. And execution will be no impact, right? So because execution is going to happen the way how it is happening, you're doing using grid or parallel execution, multi-ports and all, what you're doing on a cloud or on-premise, that is not going to change. And ChatGPT, nothing is going to help there, right? So maximum one help you can actually look at is how you actually strategize or optimize the test suits that we can use. But I would say, I think when we create the suits, the individual itself will have much more idea, right? So on creating the suits. And another high impact area is the analysis and reporting. So here the debugging, it's a very powerful tool for actually doing the debugging, where it failed, why it failed, and rerunning of failure test cases, and reporting as well. Bug reporting, if someone want to use, they can very much use, and ChatGPT can give completely documentation of the defect, so that the individual can focus more on, right, so trying and troubleshooting the defects rather than just writing a long report of right in Jira, right? So those areas it will help. And medium impact in the dashboard as well, right? So in the dashboards as well, it will help. So, I mean, I consider this as, if something is less than 15% of effort it is saving, consider it as low effect. Medium impact is about like close to 30%. High impact is about 70%, right? So, and depending on area.
Just under 10 minutes, just a reminder.
Oh, thanks, Alex. And I'm going to finish in next few minutes, maybe next hardly 3-4 minutes. Thanks for reminding me. So these are the areas, right? So if you actually see, these are the areas impact. And here the interesting thing about ChatGPT is, one might have lots of questions in the mind. Oh, what all I can do, right? So what all you can do, you have to decide, right? ChatGPT is a kind of source, abundant source, and you need to come up with innovative ways how you can use this, right? I'll explain about one of the simple use case we did actually, right? So here actually, for your thinking, there is no limitation, right? So how you want to use it, how you want to get the benefit, that is the skill individual need to have now. Individual no need to have a skill of, right, earlier, like we talk about programming, DevOps or anything else. The individual skill should be more on the right? Thinking power now, right? So rather than actually sitting and doing the coding. And this is one example of, right? So ChatGPT sample code, right? If you see how, if you'll actually write, create, testing and coding as well, it will write the BDD format, whatever you want. This is actually written by ChatGPT as it is. Actually, I've taken the screen grab, and also below is the complete code for the same test case, right? So, and it is giving complete the test. And somebody might have a question, oh, it is a simple UI test case, so you're able to generate, but it's not easy, right? Because we have APIs, we have microservices and all, right? So then I do have an example of an API, right? If I have to actually use for an API, right? So it still gives me a very much accurate code, right? For even rest assured, you can karate, right? So this is the one is the karate. So where it will actually give me the complete code, how you can write a code, right? So, and even you can actually look at the code, it's executable code it will give, right? So in most of the cases, not all the cases, but most of the cases it gives executable code, so that you don't need to actually depend on now anything, right? Let's say you want to write a library. So earlier, what is the, I mean, what is the sources are right for us, right? So whether we go to Google or we go and ask one friend who is expert in that area. Now, these two actually will be replaced by this, right? So you don't need to go to anywhere. You can actually go to ChatGPT and you can ask ChatGPT to write a library for you. Right, and some sample use cases I've given, but again, like I said, it's there is no limitation here, and it's up to your thinking power and up to your right. So you're thinking how you can actually make use of it. So actually, I have used in multiple couple of use cases. Like one I have used in generating the API scripts, automated API scripts, and it worked wonderfully for us for API scripts. Second use case I have used in migration. So migration projects, I personally feel it's a very good advantage. Let's say if client is moving from one framework to the other framework, let's say from Selenium Java to Cypress JavaScript, we used a similar use case where we are able to regenerate the libraries within a week's time. We are able to regenerate close to 100 libraries, right? Manually, if someone has to write those, it would have taken us at least 3 weeks minimum, right? But we are able to complete everything within a week. And almost it is like, if you see, 60 to 65% of the time saving we had already, right? So this is a practically we have seen already in the project, right? So again, I said the use cases you pick is very important, and that is definitely customized for your case, right? So generic use cases will not help here. Just a generic test cases, like I showed you Google test case, right? So generic will not help, right? You need to be very specific, and when you want to be very specific, you need to get onto the prompt engineering, which is why I actually mentioned in the initial slides, prompt engineering is a very much required for all the people who want to be on this. So please take that course. Maybe so many online courses are available free, and there are some priced as well, but I think you can take some of those in Udemy and other platforms, right? And but there are some limitations for Gen AI, right? So it's not like it's 100% foolproof and you can do everything in the world. Like I said, one is the determined code. Is it executable or not? ChatGPT will not tell you. That you need to figure out, right? If there are any execution related issues, right? And it cannot identify some of the paths, right? Our very common core problem is X paths or JSONs or IDs, right? So that it cannot identify because it cannot work on any application. It will give you a placeholder, then you have to go and change those, right? But still it is not bad because it is giving 80% of the code. The only 20% you deal with is the test data, right? And some of these things, and there are some limitations as well in terms of, right, how you can actually work on the banking applications. Like for example, if you have a one logins and if you have secured logins, you need to be a little bit careful on the secured logins, right? So and companies are not allowing all the companies, so you need to be careful, and you please read out your company policy before you start using this, because some companies legally are not agreeing to use this. And before I go to finish my talk, the last slide, just
5
second.
minutes.
Yeah, just 10 seconds. So this is actually 5D approach for a tester profile. I used to present this in all my forums earlier, in my earlier talks and conferences. I just still want to bring it. The reason is because here only 2 new skills I added. This actually I presented maybe 3-4 years back in one of the forums, and in most of the forums whenever I attended, right? So I never changed this from the last 3-4 years, right? Because there was no reason for me to change, because still everything was same. Even I was thinking, I'm presenting the same thing from last 3 years, 4 years. What is this actually? The skill set is not changing for a tester. At least the buckets, high level buckets are not changing, right? But if you look at 2 new things I added, right, this year in 23, which is prompt engineering and a programming skill. It's not a programming, but it's a kind of programming. You can think it's like a language based, right? Prompt engineering is the input that you give to ChatGPT. You need to have this skill for sure. And you need to have a tool wise ChatGPT, how it works and how you can actually take the tokens and do integration with your, with our IDEs, right? So these are the 2 skills I think you need to learn, and you can have a massive impact, right? As an individual, as a team. So please go ahead and try out your use case, right? What use case you have, you will only know, right? So go and try use cases. So this is what all about ChatGPT.
Thank you very much. Great session, Kiran. We've got, I can see a few questions coming in.
Sure.
There's quite a few observations as well. So maybe start from the end again, because we got some great observations, but there's one question that's come that looks very pertinent. How does the emergence of Gen AI or AI and ML impact the testing industry? Will this development complement or complicate the existing testing practices?
Impact that will this development it's actually complement, right? So maybe, sorry, explicitly maybe I didn't say that word. So it will complement the testing industry for sure. There is no doubt it will complement, right? So the only thing right, where it will complicate is, I don't know putting a slide, but again, rather than a slide, I thought maybe any question comes like this, I'll explain. Complicate where it will do is if you're trying a wrong use case with ChatGPT, right? Like I said, requirements, right? If you're trying to write your requirements using ChatGPT, I think it will be uphill task, right? You're going to go down a rabbit hole and it will become a complication, right? So that's why 80% of the times it complements. So let's take only the complement part of 80%.
Thank you. Interesting question from Aftab. What new skill sets and competencies will be required for testers to effectively work with Gen AI or AI ML tools and frameworks?
See, the new skills and all, I think that's what I put in the last slide, right? So I think for the AI right now, if you are planning to use Gen AI tools, any tools like ChatGPT, the biggest skill you need is a prompt engineering, right? So that's what I highly recommend everyone, whoever actually attending this or seeing this, please go ahead and attend prompt engineering. That is going to save you a lot, because rather than asking random questions to ChatGPT, you will have a structure. There is a framework called RGC, which is a popular framework for prompt engineering. So you can actually go and ask a structured question. So in your team, right, tomorrow when you are asking some question, a tester sitting in other geography asking some question to the ChatGPT, you need the same response back, right? So then only you can leverage. Otherwise, it will be double work for all the testers. So which is why prompt engineering, please learn it. That's the only skill you need. And the second foremost thing is, now we need to start putting some exercise for our brains in terms of what use case I can pick, right? So not just writing the straightforward code, just think about the use cases as well, right along with this.
Thank you. Well, that brings us up to time. I just guess we can end with a nice thoughtful comment from Santosh. He says, he sums it up by saying, a knife can be productive for cutting vegetables, but if used without caution, you can cut your finger.
Yes, exactly the same, right? So I think you well said, Santosh. So because it's the same thing, right? Any tool given to anyone, right? So if you don't use it in the right way, then and obviously you're going to end up going down the right negative path. Right? So it's the same case with ChatGPT.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Kiran. Great session. I really enjoyed it. We're coming up to the break now. So you've got a little break, I think just under 15 minutes. We start back at 12:17 India Standard Time. And the next presentation at 12:17 is going to be on quality engineering in a cloud-centric world by Gaurav Shrimal. So we'll go to the break now and see you in about 13-14 minutes. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks
Kiran.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good break. Welcome to the second part of the conference. Our first presentation now is by Gaurav Shrimal, Associate Director at Deloitte India. And Gaurav is talking on quality engineering in a cloud-centric world. So Gaurav, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Alec, for that quick introduction. Let me quickly share my screen and let me know once it's visible.
Okay. Perfect.
So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gaurav. I'm part of Deloitte India Testing Services. What we're going to talk about today is quality engineering in cloud-centric world. Before I get started, just wanted to talk about some of the sessions that happened earlier in the day. So Santosh did talk about security testing, which becomes very critical in the cloud world as organizations are moving to cloud-based infrastructure. We heard about biz DevOps from Nivritti. Again, aligning your DevOps to the business cycle becomes very, very important. We heard Shrikala talking about something very interesting about the enablement model for leadership. So in cloud-centric world, also when you're organizing your teams, you need to make it very enablement aligned, rather than just having some pods doing certain work as part of the whole cloud cycle. Deba talked about the golden ratio, and he did mention that it's more about having the multi-skilled engineers, and that's what we will see in the cloud world as well, that the engineers need to shift their mindset completely. We heard about the AI/ML usage in the testing world. Again, very important from cloud perspective, because as we are seeing a shift towards cloud, we are also seeing a shift in how the tools are being utilized in the cloud journeys, right? And that's where AI/ML comes into picture. Usage of AI/ML to do testing comes into picture. Little down in the day, we'll hear some talks on the SRE, which is primarily bridging the gap between development and ops team. What you would see in my talk is how do we bridge the gap between QE and ops team. There's another talk on usage of low code, no code in the AWS environment. However, it's equally applicable for any cloud journey that you take, even from the tooling perspective, even from the development perspective, right? So that's what you're going to hear about in today's talk from me. Am I an expert in cloud? Not necessarily, but I have spent good enough time in the QE world, and I do consult a lot of customers on how to take their transformation journey from a QE perspective. Now, in the cloud world, we see there are a lot of private, public, and hybrid clouds. It's a very complex environment, if you see. We also see how different organizations actually take the cloud journey and how it can impact the quality engineering transformation itself, right? So as you go from bottom to top in this journey, where in the bottom you just either retire your applications or you retain your applications, you hardly spend any effort from a QE perspective. Whereas when you actually do a repurchase or rehost of the applications, you definitely need to spend some time in testing, in making sure your quality engineering transformation is correct. And as you move towards refactor and replatforming the application, the quality engineering effort definitely increases to a great extent. So as we see, there are a lot of complex parameters. There are a lot of complex journeys that organizations are taking. And depending on the type of journey that you're taking, you definitely need to define how you're going to take your quality engineering transformation. What happens if the transformation is not correct? And I'm not going to name the organizations here, but these are scenarios which impacted all of us across the world. And these are large tech companies, these are large cloud service providers. And if you observe a common pattern across any of these organizations, you would see it was primarily about how the network impact, the connectivity impact, the impact of resilience, the impact of scale, the impact of performance on the application. So typically, when we are talking about regular applications, we're talking about functionality. We're talking about whether the look and feel is good. But as we take some of these cloud transformation journeys, we also need to make sure that we're taking care of the non-functional aspects. We're taking care of some of the aspects that we don't usually consider in our regular transformation landscape, right? So that's where you would see the testing has to shift towards more quality engineering. It should not just remain the regular testing that you do for regular applications, right? While shift left is important, shift left makes sure that we are taking care of things early in the life cycle, from a unit testing, from a system testing, from early non-functional testing perspective. Continuous testing enables to us to cover everything across the life cycle, and it has to be augmented with the automation journey as well. However, when you move towards cloud and you are taking your journey towards cloud transformation, shift right becomes very, very important, right? And we'll see what it really means. So it has to be a combination of shift left, continuous testing, and shift right. And that's where a lot of change has to be required from mindset perspective. Like Shikla was talking about, we need to enable from a leadership perspective. Same way in the testing world also, you need to make sure that people are enabled to take that shift right journey. Usage of the right tools and enabling and bringing in the AI ML perspective and the usage of the tools across the entire life cycle becomes very, very important when you're taking this cloud transformation journey. What it really means from a shift right perspective. So while you would have done the functional, non-functional testing in your lower test environments, in the environments which mock your production, like environments to a certain scale, shift right really means that you are actually monitoring what's happening in the production, high-end production environments, right? So you don't just do performance testing in your lower environments, you actually do application performance monitoring. Data becomes very, very critical in this. You need to monitor those parameters. You need to actually decipher what's going to change in the production environment. So at a certain point in the life cycle, when more load is onboarded, when more people start using your application, right? So that's where the application performance monitoring and associated performance engineering early in the life cycle comes into picture. So there's a whole loop how shift right feeds in back to the shift left engineering that you do in the overall life cycle. Chaos engineering is another important aspect. It comes into picture because real world is very unpredictable. You don't know what's going to change in your production environments. You don't know how it is going to impact your application. So that's where you need to introduce the chaos. There are various tools that are available in the market, various methodologies that are available to introduce chaos into the application. And you need to identify whether things are failing. You need to identify those edge cases that are actually going to impact your application. Disaster recovery failover testing becomes very, very important while you're moving to cloud. Cloud service providers do provide you those SLAs that are applicable for them, but you still need to do that testing from your own side to make sure that your applications will be resilient. They will recover at a certain point of time when you actually face those situations. Scalability is available in cloud, but you need to make sure that your applications are balanced enough. They have the right mechanism to actually scale when it is needed. Another important thing is you don't need to release entire thing in the production environment at one go. You really want to make sure that you're releasing right products into the market. So that's where some of this testing like canary testing, A/B testing, blue-green, red-black testing comes into picture. Canary testing, I don't know if a lot of people know about it, but it comes from those old coal mines where they used to send a canary into the coal mines, and canaries used to, if they were alive and they used to come back, it means that there's no harm in getting into the coal mine. Otherwise, there are harmful gases which are actually residing into the coal mines, and hence it's not safe enough, right? Same way, canary testing, you release a small set of features to small set of people and test whether it works well, it doesn't work well, right? Another important thing is crowd testing. Crowd testing plays a very important role, and a lot of product companies do this very efficiently. A lot of times we don't even come to know about that they're actually doing crowd testing with us when they release those features to us. It can be done in multiple shapes and forms, of course. Either you release the features at the back end of your applications and you don't really, and the users really don't know about it, or you actually identify a specific set of crowd in a specific geography from a specific demographic to actually test your applications. What it does is there are certain scenarios which you won't necessarily be able to test in your contained environments. Like there might be certain network conditions that you cannot simulate in your contained environments. And that's where crowd testing is very, very useful. And certain times customers can really test on scenarios. And I remember in one of a large banking customer, there was a customer who was doing very high-end transactions, and those scenarios were not very common. There was 1%, in fact, 0.01% of the transactions that were happening in that banking application. And they could never replicate that in their contained environment, right? So that's where some of these crowd testing scenarios come into picture. How does it help? Of course, you're able to simulate your real conditions. You want to preempt some of these aspects even before you actually release the applications to the live production. You want to minimize downtime, because any SLA breaches, any downtime that happens is going to impact the overall revenue and the credibility of your organization itself, right? So that's where some of these shift right aspects come into picture. At the same time, in the cloud environment, having the right infrastructure in place, having right load balancing, which can be stable, it has to be scalable. When your applications have that much load, you really need to size the applications correctly, and you really need to have the right environment available for you. Moving forward, what it means from an organization, from a testing organization perspective, and that's where you really need to shift from in three aspects: the technique, tools, and the talent aspect, right? From a technique aspect, you need to adopt the automation first approach. And it's not just about the shift left and the continuous testing, but also in the shift right, you need to have the right automation tools, which will actually monitor the applications in the production, give you the right data that you really need to take the right decisions. Your AI ML driven cloud native QE tools become very, very critical. And I'm not just talking about the likes of the tools that you have been using in the past, be it the Selenium for UI automation, be it any license-based tools that you have available in the market. It's more about the cloud native QE tools itself, which are compatible with the cloud apps, which are compatible with the apps when they actually move to the cloud environment, right? And those become very important. The third very important aspect, and this is something that I was talking at the beginning also, SRE is about bridging the gap between dev and ops. QE ops is actually about bridging the gap between QE and ops, because there are a lot of production monitoring that you're going to do, which is going to give you a lot of data, and data is the new fuel, right? So data is going to come in. You need to decipher information using that data. You need to get meaningful insights out of that data, which will actually feed into the early testing lifecycle. And you need to make sure that you are able to identify the right functional and non-functional requirements basis that data that is coming in from the production environment, right? Based on the inputs that are coming in from a lot of your end users who are going to use the application. So that's where you need to have a complete shift in how you're approaching the cloud transformation journey. Finally, do all the organizations need to adopt this right approach, shift right approach? Absolutely, in our opinion, because as you see, one of the large GCPs themselves, when they acquired a point of sale application, they had to move it from an old cloud provider to their own cloud services, right? And when they did the testing, they actually deployed all of the shift right approaches, be it failure recovery testing, be it chaos engineering. They've identified the right performance parameters that had to be monitored. They did the testing with minimal configurations. In fact, the QE engineers that were deployed were the QE ops engineers. They were not just the manual or the performance engineers who were part of the project, right? There were a lot of auto scaling that had to be done, and while it was their own cloud, they had to do the testing from an auto scaling perspective, because they wanted to make sure that things are not going to go or even actually the right load comes into the application, right? So that's in summary about what you need to do from a cloud engineering perspective in cloud-centric world. Very, very important to take care of various aspects from a technique, tools, and talent perspective. Very important that you adopt the right mechanisms from a process perspective, right tools, and also have a right shift in the mindset of the people. If you want to connect with me, this is my LinkedIn ID. I'll take a pause here and we'll see if we have any questions. Alec, I hope I'm on time.
Okay, thanks, Gaurav. We're good for time, actually. I think we're slightly ahead of time, so we've got some time for questions. I'll just open it up. I can see we've got a few coming in. So first, it's actually an observation by Santosh. Shift left must be by default. And on a lighter note, he adds, shift anywhere you think you can add value based on the context.
So it's good. Shift anywhere is absolutely must. And another term that I've heard a lot in the quality engineering world is shift deep. So typically, we talk about this black box testing a lot of times, and that's the terminology that I've grown up with, right, in the IT industry as well. Today, we want to shift deep, and that's where a lot of times service virtualization comes into picture, headless testing comes into picture, right? And that's also going to be very, very relevant in the cloud world, because a lot of times when you're integrating with applications, the interfaces are not available. APIs are not available. So how do you address that aspect? And that's where service virtualization comes into picture. And you actually talk about shifting deep and not just shift left and shift right. So yeah, shift anywhere is very relevant, Santosh.
Thanks. Question from Aftab. What are the potential risks and pitfalls to be aware of in quality engineering when transitioning to a cloud-centric environment?
Very good question, Aftab, and thanks for that. In fact, first and foremost, you need to be aware of what is that journey that you're taking. So I talked about 6 R's at the very beginning, right? And that's going to be very important, because that's going to determine how much quality engineering effort you're going to spend and what kind of quality engineering aspects you're going to take care of, right? So that's one part of the story. The second part of the story is data and performance engineering. Data engineering and performance engineering plays a very, very critical role, especially when you're moving to cloud. And a lot of times, organizations don't take care of these aspects, because data performance and security, I would say, actually, because by default, we assume cloud is secure because the cloud service providers are providing the cloud, and they do talk about certain SLAs that they're ready to meet, right? So that's where data security and performance needs to be taken care of, and it has to be part of your test strategy as well. In fact, from a data perspective, you need to take care of right kind of data that you're going to provide to people you do the testing. And data masking and data obfuscation is going to be very, very critical in that aspect, right? So that's something that you need to take care of when you're moving to cloud and you're defining your quality engineering transformation journey as well.
Thank you. Another question is from Gargi. How does the adoption of DevOps and Agile methodologies influence quality engineering in the cloud?
Oh, absolutely. They go hand in hand, right? Because through the adoption of Agile and DevOps, you're going to release the products very often. You want to bring in automation as much as possible. So that's where I talked about the usage of AI/ML. I talked about how you need to bring in automation first approach, so that you don't miss on testing enough and testing the right things and testing at the right time as well, right? So that's one aspect of it. Second aspect is what I like to call as Dev QE Ops, right? That's what is going to be the mantra when you're going to move to cloud, because QE sits in between the dev and the ops world, and then definitely need to go hand in hand together. So that's where the QE Ops piece comes into picture.
Thank you. Good question, actually, again from Santosh. And he's asking, in your experiences, what is the top or number one problem in cloud engineering that you have witnessed which led to business loss? I mean, what are those old damn we did it wrong moments which you've witnessed? Keeping it confidential, of course.
Good question, Santosh. Of course, I'm not going to talk about that information here. But yes, one of the things that I've seen going wrong in the cloud world is the performance aspect of it, right? Because a lot of times we just assume performance is given in the cloud, scalability is given in the cloud. And in fact, the 5 examples that I showed, and they're publicly available examples, so I didn't pick up of any of my clients. And we all got impacted by that at some point of time, right? All of us got impacted. Scalability, network connectivity, and performance is something where everyone assumed things will happen because this is cloud and we'll be able to scale as much as possible. So you need to make sure that you're testing for that, and you have factored time for that. A lot of times performance scalability testing is not factored for, or it is factored for, but then there is a very short duration for which you factor for that effort, right? So you need to make sure that you are doing that thing right. Another thing is, and I don't know if a lot of you have read this article of late, for Amazon Prime, Amazon actually talked about moving from microservices to the legacy-based architecture. And do read that article; it's available on the internet. How some of the things on the cloud itself were not helping them in streaming the videos correctly at the right appropriate time, and so on and so forth, right? So that's an interesting thing as well. It's not always that you adopt the architecture that is available today will help you in the cloud journey. You need to make a right judgment. You need to adopt the right architecture also. Don't just go in the flow. And that's where you'll get things right. So it's a very anti-cloud thing that they have done, if you may, in terms of going back to a very monolithic architecture. But that's what is serving the real purpose for them, and that's what is helping them out, right? So yes, performance factor for it, performance engineering factor for it, and make sure that you spend enough and more time around it.
Thank you. Just somebody adding, awesome. Thanks for shedding over various aspects such as performance, scalability, etc. And for that Amazon article. Thank you. I had a question actually of my own just to bring in. I mean, we heard earlier about AI and ChatGPT. I mean, it's something very hot at the moment. I mean, what are your views in this context? What are your thoughts on that, Gaurav?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Alec. AI. So as I was talking about, a lot of tools today that are available in the market, especially for cloud native apps, right? And the apps which are being migrated to cloud, you need to have the tools which are compatible with cloud, and that's where some of these AI-based apps are going to, AI-based testing tools are going to come into picture. ChatGPT, we did see a lot of use cases that can be used using the generative AI, especially in the generation of the test cases, generation of the right mapping. A lot of may not be execution itself, and that's correct. Execution may not happen. You need to have the automation suite running for it. You need to have manual test cases running for it. But definitely in terms of identifying the right scenarios, definitely in terms of generating the right test cases, that's where ChatGPT will come. And with cloud, especially identifying some of these non-functional scenarios is going to be critical. And that's where generative AI may be very, very helpful. We do definitely have to test more and see more how it actually pans out as ChatGPT and generative AI matures further.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for people to put questions in, but if I may, we've got a few moments. I could ask maybe another question. What do you think is the best skill set for somebody working in this area? I mean, what if you were hiring me? What would you be looking for in an individual?
Probably one. I would say when we are hiring, we definitely look for people who are not just talking about functional testing or automation testing. They definitely need to understand the entire gamut of the life cycle, because there are various things, and especially in the Agile DevOps world, right? And like Deva was also talking about it earlier, you will have multi-skilled people who are embedded into the product teams, who are going to share the load of the dev, the BA, the QA, and ops team as well, right? So you need to not just have the quality engineers or not just have the testers in your team. They need to understand the domain. They need to understand the functionality. They need to understand how automation has to be done. And they also need to understand the non-functional aspects of the application. And especially becomes very, very important when you're talking about a cloud world. So like I was talking about QE ops engineers, right? So they need to bridge that gap between the QE and the ops world. And that's going to be very, very critical when we are talking about cloud-centric journey, Alec.
Thanks, Carol. Now a quite in-depth question. I think again by Santosh. Do you have red-blue security team in your company or the team? And he promises he's not doing information gathering or reconnaissance.
Unfortunately, I cannot answer that question, Santosh. Sorry.
Fair enough. Excellent. So I think we're slightly ahead of schedule. So I don't know if anybody has any more questions for Gaurav, but other than that, I'd just like to say really massive thank you for taking part today. Please give your feedback. It just pops up at the end of each session. Just a reminder, we do have a feedback box, so really appreciate your feedback on this. And we've got a few moments to the next session, which starts at 12:49 India time, which is on Evangelizing the Site Reliability Engineering SRE Mindset by Venetia Jacob. So Gaurav, I think we've had all the questions by the looks of it. So thank you very much, and thanks for keeping it to time. We're just a couple of minutes ahead of schedule. So thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you in the next session.
Thank you, everyone.
See you in a few moments. Thank you. I'm back. Hi, so I'm delighted to welcome our next presenter today, who's Venetia Jacob, Associate Director, Site Reliability Engineering at Verizon India. And Venetia is speaking on evangelizing the site reliability engineering mindset. So Venetia, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so let me quickly share my screen. Yeah, just let me know when it's visible. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, let me go to the
That looks good.
mode. Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. As Alex mentioned, so I'm Venetia Jacob, Associate Director at Verizon India, and I champion SRE practices for the Verizon Consumer Group. And first of all, I would like to welcome all of you for this session. And I would be talking about how we can evangelize SRE, a mindset with the idea of building a culture of reliability and ownership. So as more and more organizations are embracing hybrid cloud strategies and IT automation at scale, so SRE or site reliability engineering continues to gain popularity. And in recent years, SRE has become an essential discipline in organizations that uses DevOps and Agile methods. So though the SRE adoption is growing, a lot remains to be done. So my talk track today will focus on some of these SRE best practices, processes, and how the organizations can build a strong SRE culture. So, so this is the agenda for today. So let's look at, there is a famous quote by Jeff Bezos, which says, we see our customers as invited guests to a party, and we are the host. So it's our job every day to make every important aspect of the customer experience a little bit better. So every customer experience matters, right? So what are our customers, clients, and the stakeholders complaining about? So issues like the web pages taking a much longer time to load. Sometimes, the customers find the issues much before the operations team notices it. Or, several times the developer community or the stakeholders ask us as if why the self-healing did not kick in as expected, and then cloud overspending and not staying within the cloud budget. I think that is also a teething problem for us. And not having the proper monitoring, not being able to catch some of the corner scenarios. And, why does it take much longer to resolve the outages, and don't we have standard documentation? And, the most important is how can we, measure the availability and the reliability, right? So these are some of the questions. So what exactly is site reliability engineering? So SRE is a software engineering approach to IT operations, and SRE teams uses software as a tool to manage systems, to solve problems, and automate operations tasks. And the concept of site reliability engineering also comes from the Google engineering team. So let's look at some of the basics of SRE, right? So reliability, availability, maintainability, and scalability. So these are the key system design attributes that are used to measure systems. And out of these, availability and reliability are basically related to the system performance. Now, there is a small difference between availability and reliability. So reliability is the measure of how long a machine performs its intended function, whereas availability is the measure of the percentage of time the machine is up and running. So for example, a machine may be up and running 90% of the time, but reliable only 75% of the time from a performance standpoint. Now, there are 4 golden signals of monitoring, like latency, errors, traffic, saturation. So I'm not going in depth into each of these, but these are the 4 critical signals that are basically used to measure the reliability of any system. And if you look below, so I have also listed some of the other metrics, like SLA. We all know what the SLA is, the service level agreement. This is the agreement with the users. So SLA is can be 99%. That is how most of the organizations define it. Then you also have the SLO. SLO is the service level objective. So this is the objective the internal team must hit to achieve the SLA. And SLOs are usually higher than the SLA. And SLI is the actual performance number, or in other words, it's the percentage of the good calls by the total calls. And if you look at it, error budget, right? So error budget is how much of downtime a system can afford without upsetting customers, or in other words, it's the margin of error that is permitted by a service level objective. So just like how you manage your home budget, error budgets are also allocated either monthly or on a quarterly basis, and only that much of downtime is allowed. So for example, if your SLA is 99.99%, the yearly allowed downtime is only 52 minutes and 35 seconds. And that translates to roughly about 4 minutes and 23 seconds per month. So it is, every, I mean, not just the SRE objective, but this is also the development team. It is everybody's responsibility to stay within that error budget, right? So now let's look at some of the other basic SRE tenets that we have, or SRE currencies that we call it, or SRE principles, right? So first one is the SRE observability. So observability is a key SRE tenet. And what do you mean by observability, right? So observability is basically instrumenting your system with tools to collect actionable data to know when the error occurs, but more importantly, why they happen. And you would ask, why do we need observability, right? So most of the organizations have a very strong and robust monitoring systems. There are several monitoring tools, like, you have tools to monitor infrastructure, to monitor database, to monitor application performance, the network, the security layer, and then Citrix. And also you have the synthetic monitoring tools. But are all these tools really serving you the purpose? Are you able to pinpoint an issue within a few minutes, or might be even 10 minutes of time? So most of the applications are so complex that the operations team find that their traditional monitoring tool set, right, it is unable to consume the vast number of events, and they are overwhelmed with alerts. And we also call it as alert fatigue, and they are unable to identify the root cause of the potential issues and the service interruption. So that is why having a very strong observability framework is all the more important. So unfortunately, many organizations don't have adequate the observability in place. So it's not just enough to be able to build and deploy systems. You should also be able to monitor them and diagnose issues when they arise. So traditional monitoring tool only provides a limited view, and sometimes it takes hours to recover from an incident. So that is where we say that monitoring is not just about ensuring that you have a steady flow of alerts, right? I mean, are the customers able? I mean, are you able to serve the customers, right? So that is the main point here. So in order to leverage observability, you will need to put in place the proper tooling and services to collect the necessary telemetry, right? So this telemetry can come from the servers, it can come from load balancers, databases, from the storage network and whatnot, right? And this will help to correlate the data between multiple sources, create context, create visualization. It will help in your automation. And most of the organizations face with these challenges. So how to reduce the alert fatigue, how to improve the efficiency of the L1 operations team, how to bring in proactive practices like self-healing, or build the end-to-end dashboards that will give you a full view of the application ecosystem, right? And by gathering telemetry in a consistent and automated way, you will also be able to bring in the machine learning operations and the AIOps practices. And that definitely is the higher gear for us. So our target should be to transform from reactive to proactive to predictive. So let's look at another critical tenet that we have, that is blameless postmortem, right? So when an incident occurs, we fix the underlying issue and the services return to their normal state. So unless we have a formalized process of learning from these incidents in place, they will reoccur again. So therefore, postmortems are an essential tool for SRE. And when things go wrong, looking for someone to blame is only a natural human tendency. So, in the next slide, I have also depicted how a good postmortem versus a bad postmortem is, right? So a blameless culture encourages a company to take a look at incidents or any challenge and shift blame from people to system. And a systems view will provide teams with a view to be open and honest about the issues that arise. So a blameless postmortem actually begins with a cultural mindset, which means not throwing any blame on any individual or team. So there should be no finger pointing, on any team or individual for causing the incident. So how can you cultivate a culture of blamelessness in your organization? So choice of language is very, very important. So use the right words while discussing the incident. So ask the what, how, and why questions, and totally avoid the who questions, and focus on the contributing actions. So it is easier said than done, right? So in the end, what really matters is how we respond to these failures. So, let's look at the other critical tenet that we have, that is chaos engineering. Now, chaos engineering is another important practice that is made famous by Netflix. And chaos engineering is the act of injecting failure into production. So the traditional testing approach or the disaster test alone will not help to validate and predict the behavior of these systems. So chaos engineering can help to bring in that required confidence and certify that the systems are resilient and fault tolerant, right? So the focus here is also to introduce the various disaster scenarios into the infrastructure in a thoughtful fashion, and to test and record the system's ability to respond under these induced conditions. So these are basically surprise tests, or we can also call it as a surgical strike on the system. So we measure how the systems respond, right? Did the failover happen as expected? If the workload is in cloud, right? Did the instances scale up as required? And also we observe from a process perspective, right? So did we get the right alerts? Were the playbooks working as expected? Did the self-healing click in? And were the L1 team, intimated, like when this issue occurred? And also from a people perspective, right? So did the L1 team respond immediately to the alert, and what was the action they took? And it's also very important to have a very good rollback, process documented. So our whole aim here is to simulate the real world events as much as possible, right? So it is also a way of instilling confidence in the system, instilling confidence in our stakeholders, clients, that these are the tests, these are the experiments that we should be carrying out, at least for our mission critical applications, just to test how prepared we are. So now let's look at the toil reduction, right? So what is toil? So toil can be defined as the enemy of SRE. And what is toil, right? So what are the tasks that can be categorized as toil? So toil is any task that tends to be manual, automatable, or that scales linearly as the service grows, which is tactical, repetitive, and might not be in few cases not even having an enduring value. But just being classified as toil doesn't mean that the task is not important or it is unnecessary, right? So on the contrary, most of the organizations would grind to a halt if the toil didn't get done. So there are, if I can explain, I give few examples of toil. So the patching that we do, the upgrades, the semi-manual deployments, the schema updates, the network changes, DNS changes, right? So security, the certificate renewals, the security vulnerability fixes, all of this. Toil, it can also be generated by any action that we take to recover from incidents. Suppose you have to do a JVM recycle, or you have to do some restarts, right? Any particular time of the day, you do the restarts. Before the start of business hours, that's what we do, restart. So all of these are also classified as toil. SRE believes that operations is an engineering problem, right? So if teams spend majority of their time on toil. They have very less time for high value work. And as a consequence, the operational cost rise and the focus is more reactive than being proactive. So this also prohibits innovation. So SRE teams time should be focused on engineering and innovation. And an engineering problem should strive for automation. So the operational work does not have to be manual and mundane task, right? So also, if you ask me, for a mature SRE organization, automation should be a part of the DNA. So we need to try to bring in more self-service options, self-healing or auto-healing, right? So that is another good option where the system will automatically detect the issue and it will also automatically mitigate the issue as well. And now if you look at it, we are in a world where the cars run in autopilot mode, right? So there is no reason to not do automation and to not address the operational problems through the engineering solutions. And if you ask me, doing manual work is bad. Doing the same manual work repetitively is a crime, and not, thinking about how this can be automated is actually a lost opportunity, right? So now we've looked at some of the critical SRE practices. Okay, so there are a lot more other SRE practices, like having a good incident management. That is very important, right? So having very efficient CI/CD pipelines, that is also very critical. Having a good release management process, having good capacity planning. So all of these standardization initiatives, okay, all of these are the basic principles, or you can tell the basic currencies of SRE. And our goal should be to move from availability monitoring to reliability monitoring, right? By using all of these SRE tenets. So now let us look at the culture element, right? And I've just listed some of the cultural tenets of SRE. So first and foremost, accepting failure as normal. So accepting failure as normal means understanding that having 100% of uptime is impossible. So no matter how much of effort you put into improving the reliability of your systems, right? So there is always a possibility of an unforeseen issue. So celebrate failure as an opportunity to learn. So I think that is the most important aspect. Then adopting a blameless culture. So we already, discussed about it, but when failure occurs, address it blamelessly. So rather than finding fault with individuals, so work together and identify the systemic causes together. So building a strong team and shared ownership is very, very important. So SRE culture emerges from within the team. It cannot be enforced top down without support. So involve people at every level to help form this culture mindfully. It is very important to break down silos of information, have a bridge between the development and the operations team. Involve SRE team right from the architecture and the design phase of any project, right? So usually we see that SREs are after the fact, right? So after the application is designed, when the application is about to be deployed in non-prod, that is when the SRE team comes into picture. But we have to come out of that model. SREs, or we can also look to have the embedded SRE. SRE team should be a part of all the development discussions, of all the architecture design discussions, and they have to be involved right from the beginning. A new project or a new application or a new service is being designed. Putting resiliency first. So reliability is feature number one. So it doesn't matter how feature rich or innovative your service is, if your users cannot access it. And when designing the specifications for a service, include your reliability goals. So use your SLOs and ensure that that is at the topmost, that is the most critical point when you discuss. And promote continuous improvement, right? So continuously review and revise the policies, practices, and resources so that you can promote a culture of continuous improvement. So we spoke a little bit about building that reliability mindset, right? So how exactly can you build it? So first and foremost is be prepared. So as we mentioned, failures are inevitable. So even an all-star SRE team knows that incidents are inevitable. So put in place processes and systems that will make it easy to detect, mitigate, and prevent problems, right? Next one is embrace automation, identify toil and eliminate manual touch points. So build in more and more automation such that the operations task run in an almost autopilot mode. let data do the talking, right? So be deliberate about the metrics that you track and put them at the front and center of your decision making and prioritization, and use this data to identify the customer needs, communicate with your stakeholders, and so on. Then debrief without blame. Cultivate an environment that is devoid of blame, but filled with trust, transparency, growth, and accountability. Close the feedback loop. So develop a process of evaluating feedback and measuring, ensuring that the team has a clear understanding of the decisions that have been taken. And last,
10 minutes left.
okay, sure. And last but not least, the most important point is be customer centric, right? So customer centricity means putting the customer first and center of everything that you do. So as I conclude, these are some of the key takeaways, and we've already discussed this, but I'll just close it fast, right? So redefine operations. I think when you build your SRE team, build it with the right skill set, build it with the right mix of people. Just renaming your DevOps or your production support team to SRE will not help, right? So you need to build the team with the right skill set. You need to have the proactive monitoring, alerting, self-healing initiatives, good observability framework, simplify the tools and processes. Standardization is a very, very, very critical tenet, right? And that is actually the base of any of the automations that you do. So standardize, have standardization, and track the reliability metrics very, very closely. Eliminate toil, automate all the operations work that you do, right? And embrace SLIs, SLOs. Okay, so that should be your main talking points. And last but not least, the most important piece of this is culture, right? So build a strong SRE culture. With that, I would like to thank each one of you for joining this session and listening to me patiently. And again, thanks to the event organizers, Unicom and Alec and everybody for having me here. Thank you. And with that, I open up for the Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks, Vinita. Excellent presentation. I can see a question that's coming already. This is from Raj. What are the primary metrics and indicators used to measure the effectiveness of SRE efforts?
Yeah, so if you ask me, it is definitely, so when you build the scorecard for SRE, okay, definitely you have to look at MTTR, the mean time to resolve, and might be the zero outage days, mean time between failures. Okay, so MTTR, then toil reduction. Okay, definitely. I mean, I know it is very tough to measure toil reduction per se, but you can look at, okay, how much work was being done manually before, how much is being eliminated by the automation that you have put in. Cloud cost. Okay, definitely cloud cost also should be part of your scorecard. That also should be part of your metrics, right? So are you staying? I think you need to have a very good governance on the cloud cost as well. And definitely reduction in the outages. I think that is also a very critical point. So all this MTTR, zero outage days, reduction in outages, how many outages you avoided, right? Or from your framework, and how fast you responded to incidents. I think all of this, and definitely, you also need to have a very good CI/CD pipeline, right? So that is where the releases, how fast you're able to deliver code to production. I think all of that will be part of the SRE, metrics.
Thanks. Couple more questions coming. I'll take them in the order that they came. The next one is, what are the common challenges and roadblocks encountered during the implementation of SRE, and how can they be overcome?
Yeah, so if you ask me from a challenges and a roadblock perspective, right? I think first of all, making the organization realize that SRE is a critical, a way forward. Okay, I mean, most of the organizations have production support in mind, but yeah, so automation, what is the gain that you get from automation? I think that is something that you have to explain to the organizations. Okay, also one other thing that we see is, okay, people try to emulate what Google has done. So Google is the pioneer in SRE, right? And we also often look upon the Google SRE model. Sometimes we try to adopt it as is, but we all should remember that there is no one size fits all solution, right? So Google's SRE model will not fit as is to all organizations. So there are several reasons for it, like the organization culture, your org priorities, your budget constraints, your strict release priorities, DevOps maturity. Sometimes even you might not be measuring the customer experience, right? So every organization has their own priorities, and you have to define your SRE goals based on your priorities. And SRE should actually focus on understanding the ground reality of the organization, understand what are the key pain points, and then you have to build your SRE model on top of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Got time for another question, and this one is: what are the technical skills required if anyone wants to move to an SRE role?
Yeah, so I would say it is the basic. Yeah, I would say it is the basic production support technical skills, definitely. Okay, but added to that, the person should also start thinking from like a developer, right? Like a software engineer. I mean, start thinking from a code perspective. Should be very, and when I talk about the basic production support skill set, is definitely they should be aware of monitoring. They should be aware of the basic middleware skills. Cloud, that person definitely, because most of the workloads are in cloud, right? So let it be AWS or GCP or OCI. So whatever cloud platform your organization is supporting, definitely they have to be an expert in that. Now, more and more organizations are also getting into Kubernetes, managed services, AWS managed services, or some of those, right? So EKS, so these are some of the other skill set. Automation plays a very key role. I think the person should be, very strong in Python and some of those, the other automation skills as well. And I think, yeah, these are some of the skills that I can think about, but having definitely that production support mindset will help. And also think how you can build this as a product, I think, right? That is what if you run into any operational challenge, how can that be converted to an engineering use case? And how can a product be built out of it, right? How can you customize it? I think these are, that whole thought process is, not that of a sysadmin that, okay, this is my work, I do my work every day and I go home. That should not be the attitude. It is, how can you convert it to an engineering use case? How can you build an automation out of it? How can you build a product out of it? I think that is the overall mindset that is required.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Vinita.
Thank you.
I'll see our pop-up feedback box has just popped up again. So thank you. We're slightly ahead of schedule. We've got, I think, about 5 minutes until the next session starts. So if I can just ask one last question to, please, Vinita, out of curiosity, are there particular sort of products or vendors that you work with that you found particularly good, or maybe otherwise?
So it is not exactly, but what I would suggest is there are, if you look at it, Google has got a very strong SRE practice. They are the pioneers of SRE. So for any organization that wants to move into SRE, I would definitely suggest that look at Google's SRE practices, look at Netflix SRE practices, right? You might even get into some discussions with them. Otherwise, there are a lot of other AIOps tools. There are a lot of other tools available. There are a lot of monitoring tools available, observability framework that is available outside in market, right? On the AIOps side, I think MookSoft, and there are a lot of, so that, MookSoft and some of those other vendors, they'll definitely help to build that strong observability framework. But otherwise, I think there are no vendors per se, right? It's all, what is your organization need? What is your drive? I mean, is it customer, focused? Is it more, customer serving application? Are you looking to serve your customers, or is it just deploying code to production faster? Look at what are your, priorities and how much of budget you have, right? That is also, you move all the workloads to cloud. It is not that easy. It is not that, less expensive as well. That is also a costly affair. Yeah, keep into mind all these things, but definitely look at some of the experts that are there out there, right? So Google and McKinsey, and I think McKinsey will help to might be validate what you're doing or what you're building. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really useful. Vinita, thanks again. Great session, and thanks for taking the questions there at the end. It's been really good. We're spot on for time, so again, thank you. And move on now to the next session, which is on Enterprise DevSecOps. So we'll see you there in about a minute. Thank you. Thanks, Vanita.
Thank you.
Everybody, we're just about to start the next session. Hi, Mohammed. Okay, so welcome back. Absolutely delighted to welcome our penultimate speaker today, who is Mohammed Anwar. Mohammed is IT Engineering Enterprise DevOps Manager at Accenture, and he's presenting today on Enterprise DevSecOps. So Mohammed, I'll hand over to you and I can see your screen perfectly.
Thank you, Mac, for introducing. So I'm just introducing a little more about me. So hi, everyone. I am Mohammed Anwar. I have over 17 years of experience in IT. In diverse domains, I started from educations, media, entertainment, telecommunications, government, banking, insurance. So since last couple of years, I travel a couple of locations and I work from there, starting from North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, and various IT cities, almost all the IT cities which we have in India. So I have worked almost all the locations. I'm certified as a DevOps coach, DevOps leader from DevOps Institute, AWS DevOps professional, Azure DevOps solutioning and implementation master. I have completed ITIL V4 managing professional certifications as well. And there are a couple of more 10, 15 certifications from other programs. So DevSecOps, Enterprise DevSecOps, is one of my interesting practice area. A couple of years ago, around 2007 till 2020, I have worked in global infrastructure privilege access management platform in full life cycle, the complete SDLC. From there, my security awareness and understanding, and I started gaining experience from there. So let's begin from here. So here I have outlined what I'm going to talk in my sessions today. So we'll start from business and technology, where we'll discuss and get to know more about what, why, and how we are interlinked, where business is more focusing and technology. In the next slide, we'll I will more talk about agility and cloud in enterprise DevSecOps and DevSecOps processes transformation. Next slide, I will be covering global reports and challenges with various segments and geographies. We'll try to build a business case. We'll try to, I have one sample as well to show you. Next, we'll discuss, after building the business case, what are the target states for the enterprise to reach? What are the maturity assessment? We'll discuss more, one of the model, DSOMM maturity assessment model. And at the end, we will talk more about the DevSecOps lifecycle as complete SDLC tooling, and last two, we'll try to cover culture and benefit ROI and KPIs. So let's begin from here. What is enterprise DevOps? Enterprise DevSecOps is a culture and engineering practice that promotes collaborations between development team, security, and operational. So these three teams is more collaborative and more organized to achieve the desired goal and objective. Through automation. So it enables the rapid and frequent delivery to secure infrastructure and software to productions. DevSecOps encompasses the end-to-end software development processes, managing the complete flow, and it intends to release in a predictable, transparent, and minimal human-intensive manner. If I talk here more specific to the business, so in what we could say, it's more focused on collaborations and communications to achieve and to more seamlessly integrate the security where the business needed and where we need to implement and integrate the security practice, security in terms of business. And what are the automations, how we can make sure our business is and the product and the applications which we are building for the enterprise, how we are practicing and adopting in full automated cycles by leveraging the tooling. And then we'll more focus the organizations is more focusing on setting up the priorities in securities, building trust, customers, stakeholders. It accelerates the software delivery, reduces time to market. In business, primarily more focus on the implement secure coding practices and how we are getting into it, how we are identifying the threats, how the business is getting benefited, what are the ROIs, and different aspects of business in securing the infrastructure and the complete business from the outsider. In technology, it's more focused on automations and toolings. In terms of security vulnerabilities, the scanning, configuration management, continuous monitoring, that treats the infrastructure as a code, allowing for version control, automated provisioning, secure configurations management. It's more on the practice is more on security testing. I believe we have a couple of more sessions on AI testing is taking place now, and there are many more quality engineering. So those practices is more giving more stream and seamless experience while we are integrating the technology, different toolings, which is more appropriate and closer to the in why technology is. So technology security is everywhere. While we start planning, moving to design, development, operations, testing. So it is everywhere. So that enables security into all the phases, all the cycles, to reducing the vulnerabilities and mitigations that is. It's a continuous security practice where ensuring the ongoing monitoring, testing, and you're maintaining robust, secure by measuring and rapid response on threat. So we have many tooling and practices and artificial intelligence tools nowadays by which we are automating the complete cycle. And who is more in technology involved? So it starts from your leadership, your C-level executive to leadership, who are primarily focusing and organizing and giving the right goal and vision to adopt security in your enterprise across the products and the practices or applications which we are building in the digital market. It's complete. I mean, it's not a single. It's the responsibilities for the entire team. Either you are a developer or you are a manager or leading your practices. So security is everyone's responsibility. Organizations has successfully adopted and built a security team, and it's a complete structure. So we'll talk in a couple of slides later, a little bit more, while we'll be doing the assessment and the business cases. So here, if you see this diagram, so this talks more about how the enterprise DevSecOps enables enterprises to combine the agility of agile methodologies with the scalability and flexibility of DevOps, DevSecOps in cloud infrastructure, facilitating the transformation from traditional waterfall to agile to DevSecOps practices. So SRE is streamlined for most of the organizations now. So, and similarly, DevSecOps practices empowers enterprises to adopt agile and DevOps methodologies, enabling faster development cycle, iterative and feedback development, and the loop, increased collaborations by adopting cloud and the agility, or you could say the more technologies. Enterprises can leverage, most of the enterprises has already started the cloud native technologies. There are many automated tools which is already there. So this is more around, you have, let's say, organizations, you have information technology where more technology tooling and practices you are doing in your organizations. In the slides, if you talk the next two layer, it talks more about the practices, how the organizations have moved from waterfall, or how the organizations is moving from waterfall to agile to DevOps and DevSecOps. And it's combined all your agile, DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE. It brings the agility in your practice while you are fully and becoming or trying to become mature in your organization's the complete security practices. Here, I'm going to show you a couple of global reports and challenges which the globally across the different organizations is facing, and where we are at this moment, and where the enterprises are focusing and lagging. So these reports are more is coming from the global, which I have referred from the global CIO, Dynatrace, Synopsys, GitLab, Gartner, and some other global reports. If you will see here, the first one, it is primarily for the North America, US, Brazil, and Mexico. So 29% in US, it's most of the manual task is involved, and which create issues while you do the code quality. Similarly, Brazil 31%, Mexico 21%. And if you will see that increased organization as in terms of investment, in terms of where the development, security, and operations is more spending the organizations in the current market, global market. So it's 18 million. And you have heard, I believe, Microsoft and Google and AWS as well. They have mega budget for doing and practicing and enabling and building the services which is securing your project, your programs and your applications. They are building many services which and investing a lot in the global market. Similarly, if you, I could show you for the Asia Pacific, where we have Australia, Singapore, India, and Malaysia. The same reports, it's little increase, their quality in terms of they are 30%, 35%. And the investment at this moment, it is almost, this is the annual investment. So this report has been generated by Synopsys. And similarly, we have the emphasis on quality and security. So still we are, it's not mature, we could say in terms of maturity, it's level 2 or level 2.5 out of 4. Similarly, if you will see the Middle East, it is coming around the same numbers. So where sometimes as a leader, or while you are building a product or implementing security, so whose primarily responsibility is this security? So it's everyone, either you belongs to or more focusing and responsible for development or core security or operations. It's everyone's responsibility. This is one of the reports which talks about the responsibility in terms of how much we have. And similarly, if you will see the challenges, so here we have the testing is one, difficult priorities, vulnerabilities, remediations. This is another challenge with most of the organizations. In terms of, you can see the reports and you can observe that how much challenges at this moment different organizations are facing. And these challenges is everywhere. I believe all the organizations, most of the organizations at this moment, and they are trying to improve their practices and more practice is the rank in terms of the policy ignorance. This is the number one where the organizations are ignoring input validations. So these are the different I listed here to just to show you the ranking from 1 to 13 where we are and what are the things general organizations needs to focus on to bring this and mitigate this respective to their entire digital applications. So why security is important? We'll talk more, but here in terms of records. So it's if you will see here, so it's impact the business validations, impact on business validations, reputational damage, loss of customers, loss in revenue. If one time your organizations, any applications or any issues global, it's published and it's become a bottleneck, the complete bottleneck for the organizations. Either it's only one small applications or all, or number of applications. The impact goes the all. You will lose many, in terms of. So that is the reason the organizations and enterprises are more focusing to adopt security and DevSecOps, and by automating they are saving. So this is just a landscape in terms of for your enterprise. The numbers will be different. So these reports is for the different. For example, here we have on-premise. This is the 20-25%, cloud-hosted virtual, cloud-hosted container services, cloud-hosted functional functions as a service. So these are the different numbers. And if you will do the survey or your assessment enterprise, it might be different. But this is general. The organizations is at this moment the numbers are. So here there are the, if we will talk the top two, what are the priorities organizations are taking now? So in terms of percentages, so 39% is more around the DevSecOps product development and improving the employee cybersecurity awareness and consolidate security solutions and controls. So these three priorities, and these are the numbers, it's still the leaders need to focus more on this. All right, so here we are going to, now we know, more what the DevSec, enterprise DevSecOps is. So now let's say you are going to build a business case for your enterprise. So I'm just showing you one Canva which I have prepared just to show you. So you will start with your overview or introductions that will contain your organization's main focus on security DevSecOps enterprises, and what are the challenges and what you would like to achieve, and what is the mission, vision, objective, problem statements, key challenges, ROIs, improve security, how you can improve your security, what you would like, what's your expectations, competitive. So before showing you the example, just trying to give you more insights, what the business case is for building a DevSecOps enterprise. So this is giving you the justify the investment by highlighting the benefit of integrating security practices into software development lifecycle, mitigating the risk, and ensure delivery secure, high quality your software solutions. Here I have added a sample examples that we are going to leverage going. So let's take one or two the key challenges which we are going to follow in a couple of slides. We are going to now align the rest of them more towards this business case. So let's pick one, the regulatory compliance challenges. This is one challenge for your enterprise, and the traditional development practices priorities to speed the security. And the third is integrating of security throughout the software development lifecycle. Let's derive this in a couple of, and we'll try to discuss and align you what and how we are going to achieve. So let's say your business case is ready. Next, you are going to focus on that where you wanted to achieve. I mean, you have the proper plan. So you will start with your strategy and plan. Obviously, you will do your current state assessment, and then you will set the target state assessment. So this is your target states where your practice and as an organization, security, your enterprise, you are practicing and you are keep continuously improving and implementing the more security postures and services. So here we have the continuous integrations, continuous testing, continuous delivery, continuous operations, and continuous culture. So this is more towards the target state of enterprise DevSecOps. So this is it. By this, you are trying to achieve your seamless integrations of security by developing in security in your development operations and the complete your SDLC stages and different you could say the more on the practices, which enables your organizations to build and deliver the secure, high quality software solutions while maintaining the compliance and regulatory.
I mean, we just got about 8 minutes to go.
Okay, 10 minutes we have?
Just under, I think about eight minutes.
Okay, all right, thanks, Mark. So we have a couple of slides to go over. I believe 6, we have 4 more to go. So here we have the same, it is coming from this is more around your as-is assessment, where you have the build design, you will do the complete these different stages assessment, and the ranking will be, let's say for ranking, you are going to follow the DevSecOps maturity assessment model. So by this model, this have the 4 layers. The layer 1 is basic understanding of security practices, and layer 2 talks about more adoptions of basic security. And layer 3 maturity 3 talks about more about the high adoptions of security practices and high advanced development of security practices at your level 4. It's a complete and survey or assessment which you can do based on. After that, you can reach out to your target states and build your practices. All right, so the next one is more around toward the different stages of life cycle. So in plan, in this stage, organizations define your enterprises that primarily your goal is to establish the security requirement and outline the overall strategy for integrating security practices into the software development lifecycle. In design, during the design phase, you are primarily trying to do the resilient and trying to address your security controls, different security threats. In the next stage, in build, primarily you are practicing what are the best secure code you need to apply or implement while you are writing your code. And the automation tools for your different scanning, static scanning, and while you are writing your secure. There are a couple of more AI tools which is helping the developers to generate the secure code, and then you can validate if it is. So those practices are there. In testing, I believe we had a couple of, more. So here you can start with your vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, functional testing. And these are the different tools if you will see in the bottom. Similarly for packages, if you are using your container services, you are doing the container registry, container dependencies, proxies, integration, security tests, and compliance, the complete compliance test. Similarly for security, you have the static security, SAST, dynamic DAST, and interactive application security testing. And you have the many more to detect your secrets and compliance. You can use as per your organization's uses in your SDLC. Similarly, for deploying your complete pipelines, fixes, releases, and operations and monitor, you are more focusing on logging, tracing, alarming. There are different services. If you are in cloud, all the cloud providers, they do have the different services to integrate in terms of the different securities for alerting and the different. And this is a workflow for the pipeline workflow, your implementations. So just I have bring this.
Just 5 minutes left.
Okay, so I will complete in 2 minutes. We have only 2 slides to go. Yeah, so SaaS, where the security tooling are more involved. The next is more specific to the Azure DevOps, where you have this Azure policy. GitHub, through GitHub Actions, you can automate your Azure container registry. You have the Microsoft Sample Key Vault to secure, and you have also for DAST, you have OWASP, shared API, and you have many services according to your application and organizations you can do. So why DevOps culture is more, and we need to build our secure DevSecOps mindset. This is more around to build your organizations in DevSecOps. And these are the, I have listed what are the benefits you will get if you are transforming your organizations into DevSecOps and you are applying the right methodologies, you are adopting the right practices, you are adopting the building your excellence in your organizations by leveraging the services and tooling and practices.
I mean, the sound's breaking up a little bit. It's breaking a little bit. Yeah, I can't hear you at the moment. I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. Oh, that's better now. Yeah, thanks.
Alex, I'm just looking if we have any questions, so I can address.
Yes, we
so
have
let me
actually.
see if we have something in the chat.
We've got just two.
So what are the challenges in common pitfall when transforming to an enterprise DevSecOps approach, and how they can overcome? So there are lots of challenges which we saw in the one of the reports, GitLab reports. The main challenges is the organizations to set the priorities, the vulnerability priorities, and bring the right tool. And we discussed the more challenges in the business case as well. For example, the right practices, right tools, and building the culture of DevSecOps mindsets, and how you will transitions from there. So transitioning, it happens, it depends, it's your phrase. I mean, you are going to build scratch new product, or the existing product you are going to transform, and you are going to adopt the DevSecOps approach. So the approach is primarily, it's start for your existing products or existing applications by assessing. So you will have the organization's level assessment for your applications, and then you will see where you are landing at this moment, and then you will set the directions and approach how you will transform your enterprise to get the desired state or the target state, which we have discussed in the previous slide. The next question is, how can we organizations secure and scale and flexibility of the DevSecOps processes? So this is more towards, if you will see the ROI, the previous slides which we discussed here. So these are the metrics and KPIs, and this, if you are investing in your organization, and these are the benefit you will get top of that. The first is you will reduce your time to market, continuous compliance. You will build your product more secure, more compliant to go over your local market or international market, and your customer satisfaction, your company branding, everything will increase. Yeah. Any other questions we have?
I think we're actually, apologies to everybody, we're actually on time. We're kind of out of time. I just want to say a massive thank you, Mohammed. That really good presentation. Thanks for staying on for the questions. We're against the clock a little bit, so we're moving on to the next session in just a moment, which is on low-code, no-code tooling in AWS ecosystem. So Mohammed, again, thank you for a great session. Apologies if we didn't get to answer all the questions, but we're running out of time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our very final session of today, our last session is on, again, a really hot topic right now we're finding, which is low-code, no-code tooling in AWS ecosystems. But certainly, I'm based in the UK, and we found, I'd say for the last 8 years, certainly last 18 months even, low code has been a really big topic coming up increasingly at all of our conferences here. And it's really good to welcome Bhagayashree Chandak, who's Enterprise Solutions Architect at AWS India. And she's talking on low code, no code tooling. So I will hand over to Bhagayashree.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alec, for that introduction. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I actually heard some amazing sessions earlier during the day. So firstly, I'm greatly honored to be part of the Unicom Expo today. So let me begin with a quick introduction about myself. My name is Bhageshri, and I'm a solutions architect here at AWS India. While I work as a generalist SA here, I also specialize in the area of AI and ML. I majorly work with the customers in the enterprise segment. So yeah, that's in nutshell about me. So today I have been invited here to share my thoughts or my insights on the topic low code, no code tooling in AWS ecosystem. I'll try my best to cover whatever I have on the topic for you today. And towards the end, if time permits, I'll try and address a couple of questions as well. Else, happy to connect offline or over email too. I'll drop in my coordinates in the chat window. Yeah. So before jumping right into the topic of low code or no code platform, let us first start with some of the key challenges that developers face today. So it's often noticed.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing slides or?
Oh, okay, it's not visible, is it?
No, we can't see your screen at the moment. I realize your
okay.
camera's not working, but let
me reshare it.
Oh yes, that's fine. We can see that now. Perfect.
Okay, so the slide that you see is the challenges, right? The one which
quickly building reliable code is challenging.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for that confirmation. Yeah. So the point actually that I was trying to mention here is it's often noticed that organizations, they face several hurdles when trying to quickly write code for applications, and the need for building such applications is fast growing as well. In fact, Gartner's 2023 report states that 76% of the CIOs, they reported an increase in demand for these new digital products or services during the pandemic. And 83% expect this demand to further grow in the upcoming year. But somewhere the traditional development methods that we have, they aren't able to meet the increased demand from the business. Just to give an example here, developers today, they have to manage writing code in multiple programming languages. So you may be a Java developer, and let's say your new project, maybe it's a little heavy on data processing. And that's where you might have to make use of Python, because there are better libraries available for data processing in Python, and it could be a preferred choice for data engineering tasks as well. So that's one case that we discussed about. But even if, let's say, you stick to a single programming language as well, there are multiple frameworks, there are multiple libraries. For example, as a Python developer, you might be familiar with Flask, but your new project, let's say, it has a demand for Django framework. So now you have to pick up a new framework, and on the top of that, there are these multiple APIs. There are multiple cloud service providers as well. In fact, there are multiple domains such as analytics, machine learning, so on and so forth. So in short, the point that I'm trying to drive from this slide is that, like, developers, in addition to spending a significant portion of their time manually developing code that is quite straightforward, that is quite undifferentiating, are also spending a lot of time exploring, learning, and keeping up with this complex and ever changing tool and technology landscape. And at the same time, what happens is it leaves very less time for developers to actually develop something that is creative, that is differentiating, or something that actually solves these complex business scenarios that we have. So, and in the process, what also ends up happening is due to this extra time pressure that we generally go through, we may unintentionally violate some open source software copyrights or licenses issue when we are sharing our code through the developer forums. I believe all of us have at some point have done this, like copying or sharing codes to different developer forums, etc. And not to miss the additional security vulnerabilities that might creep into your code base. So what we saw in the previous slide was the scenario from, let's say, the lens of a software engineer. But in the realm of application development and cloud platforms, we are well aware of the diverse roles and individuals that exist. Like, it could be your data analyst, it could be your cloud engineer, business analyst, so on and so forth. And for instance, in the extensive domain of machine learning itself, and especially with the advent of Gen AI, now business analysts are seeking for ways that will enable them to generate these precise machine learning predictions. And to be honest, they do not want to get into the nitty-gritty of writing code, or they do not want to have any prior machine learning experience on it. And this shift is actually pointing to the evolving demands of the industry today. So I believe this is why the concept, or this is why the platform of low code or no code is gaining popularity. And for people who are new to this approach of software development, in very simple words, low code or no code is a software development approach that allows team to develop these digital solutions. It allows team to create these enterprise-wide applications, either with minimal coding or with no code at all. I believe that word no code is quite descriptive in itself. And while some of these low code, no code tools or platforms are all inclusive, like you can build your mobile or web applications just by clicking, dragging, and dropping the components from the canvas that you have. There could be other platforms or other tools that provides users with custom code components or boilerplate script in case you wish to update some parts of the website or web application. Maybe you want to drop a JavaScript and modify it here and there. But the idea is it's not a full-blown programming environment wherein you create a brand new application like you do in Python or in Java. And to top it, low code, no code platforms now also let you connect multiple such tools together, and you can create an entirely new application out of it by integrating this bunch of tools together. So, what are the benefits of such a low code or a no code platform? So one important benefit that I feel, and I feel like because of this, it has a lot of cascading effects as well. So this is that it allows individuals with limited coding experience to build and launch applications. And these things I believe are very attractive right now with generative AI coming into picture as well, because a lot of business users and people who are not technical can now take that idea that is in their head, and they can do something in real time just by connecting those dots together. Not only that, even professional developers also use low code or no code tools for repetitive tasks that generally do not require that conventional software development process. And as I mentioned, this has a cascading effect from there on. So it streamlines your entire application development, which leads to increased productivity. It reduces the costs as well, as applications can now be built in-house with minimal coding knowledge. Further, it provides you with visual building tools as well that again may require only minimal backend code. And not to miss the topic of security here. So these low code platforms actually, they come with built-in security features as well that protects your applications and data from unauthorized access. I know the slide here, it looks a bit busy, but these are some trends that is being observed in the market for the low code or no code platforms. And while you can have a look into it, according to the latest forecast from Gartner, the need for such like composable business initiatives and such enterprise-wide hyper automation that we can currently see, these would be the key drivers that would accelerate the adoption of low-code technologies throughout 2026. In fact, Gartner actually predicts that the low-code development technologies market would grow by 20% as compared to 2022 this year. The idea is like by equipping both your professional IT developers and your non-IT like individuals who could be your business technologists with a wide range of these low code, no code tools, organizations can now attain the required competency. They can attain the required delivery speed to thrive in this agile environment. And that's what you can see as well. Like if you read that prediction, like by 2026, the non-IT developers will actually account for at least 80% of the user base for such low code development tools. And with the same time, now that generative AI has thrown a realm of opportunities and possibilities for the low code market, now, different vendors are responding again to these needs with better collaboration, their better DevOps tool, better governance features, and there is an entire wave of R&D that is getting focused on this generative and assertive AI. So again, a huge potential in the market for these low-code platforms. Now, coming to the AWS offerings on low code, no code. But please note that this is not an extensive list actually. I have tried to divide the different offerings across 3 different categories, but that is the development or business management services, the ETL or reporting tools, and the machine learning tools. While some of these services, they work in a low code manner, like optionally giving you the opportunity to further customize the code as well. Some work in completely no code fashion. For example, the Glue data brew, or which is our ETL tool, and the SageMaker Canvas, which is our machine learning based tool. It's a complete no code platform on AWS. A great way for business analysts to start developing their ideas. On the other hand, Amazon Appflow that you see on the top row, it lets you transfer data between your SaaS applications, such as your Salesforce, Zendesk, Google Analytics, and I believe there are 50 such SaaS connectors that it currently supports. So it lets you transfer the data between these SaaS applications to AWS services, such as you can either transfer it to your data lake on S3 or to your data warehouse on Redshift. So the idea is it lets you build this data line, this entire data pipeline that you have in few clicks, either using AWS console or by using APIs as well. So again, low code, no code platform. Again, likewise, the AWS Glue Studio that you see, or the Amazon SageMaker Studio that you see. In fact, Amazon Bedrock, which will be our generative AI offering, which will actually host the Gen AI models. All these are examples of, again, low-code platforms on AWS. So today, what I'll be doing is I'll be speaking on 2 such services, which is AWS Amplify Studio and another that is Amazon Code Whisperer. So starting off with AWS Amplify Studio. So before I jump into the service directly, let us talk about a typical design to application process. So generally, we have this expectation that we are going to work with a UI designer. They are going to talk to the front-end developer who would get those changes implemented. And then he'll work with the back-end developer to get all the business logic, all the cloud logic implemented. In the end, we'll have a product, we'll go live with that product, and it will make our customers happy, right? So I believe it's an ideal situation in which we all wish to be. But what happens is, in reality, the situation is quite different. There is always some friction that goes on between the designers and the front-end developers. Maybe the designers have added or requested for additional changes. And there is always some communication overhead that we generally see in this area. And at times, this just spirals a little out of control, where everybody just starts talking to everybody else, creating a kind of chaotic situation altogether. And still, in spite of all this, we might end up in a situation wherein your actual product would look different from what the UI designer designed it for. So at Amazon as well, we actually deeply analyzed as to why there is this little bit of friction here. And it turns out that especially on the front-end developer side, these developers, they spend months in pixel pushing, and people who are new to this concept of pixel pushing. It is this tiny, minute UI changes that the front-end developers, they try to make just so that the final product looks pixel perfect. But on the flip side, because of the points that we discussed earlier, the results often looks something different. So we actually surveyed our designers too, and it turns out 50% of the time they are not satisfied with the developers' implementation of those designs. And unfortunately, we live in a world where designers are not happy and the developers are frustrated. And I highly believe like there should be some better way to handle this situation, right? And wherein a designer, maybe he can provide his designs that he has designed using Figma tool, put this into a box, and out comes, let's say, a React code that is fully production ready. So this is where actually Amplify Studio fits into this entire scenario. So just to briefly tell as to what Amplify Studio is. So it's nothing but a visual development environment, and it lets you build this full stack web as well as your mobile applications. In fact, with Studio, you can quickly build an entire web application front to back with minimal coding required. And you can still maintain that full control over your application design and behavior through the code as well. So a real quick tour about the capabilities of Amplify Studio, but I would definitely encourage you all to go through this service because there is a lot that this service has to offer, and I'll not be able to pick up all those capabilities. But these are the three major capabilities that Studio actually lets you perform. So in order to accelerate your UI development, Amplify Studio, it offers a dozens of UI components, such as your news feed, your contact forms, other primitives such as buttons, text areas, etc. Further, all the UI components are fully customizable with Figma as well. Alternatively, you can even import your Figma designs into Amplify Studio too, and it will convert all those into your React components. Additionally,
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, we've only got 5 minutes left.
Okay, Alec, can we have additional 5 minutes? Would it be fine?
Yeah, it may leave us without time for many questions, but yeah, that okay.
Okay, no problem. For questions, Alec, maybe I'll reach out to the people offline, or they can anytime reach me over email too.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So the point is like even when you build this application using Amplify Studio, you can connect those UI components to the data store as well from the backend, which could be running in the cloud. And it also lets you like ship your entire, so once your application is ready, you can in fact ship your application by using a fully managed CI/CD hosting service. Additionally, last but not the least, whatever you have in the end is a full production ready application ready to scale. So this is how a typical like rental website actually can be built using Amplify Studio. So in the first step, you can define your schema. Next, you can go ahead and you can import the readily available Figma templates in the studio as well. Or you can go ahead and import your Figma file as well from your Figma tool. So once you have your data store available, once you have your Figma design available, UI components created, you can bind those UI components to the underlying data source that you created. Additionally, you can even create collections. You can even have paginations created. So it lets you create a whole lot of complex applications. And towards the end, it gives you a production ready React code that you can go ahead and you can deploy. Now, like coming to the Code Whisperer service. So Code Whisperer, it's nothing but a code generator service that is completely powered by generative AI. So it's been trained on actually billions of lines of Amazon and open source code. So Amazon Code Whisperer, it lets you quickly generate secure code right in your IDE itself, that too in real time. So these suggestions are majorly governed based on whatever comments you give and based on your surrounding code. For example, you can ask Code Whisperer to read a CSV file, pull out maybe the second column and sort it in descending order, and it will generate the code for you. It will even write the unit test cases for you. So it's available as an extension in Visual Studio, in fact, PyCharm and other IDEs as well. The languages that it currently supports includes Python, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, and 10 other programming languages that you can see on the screen. So in a nutshell, this is how the service works. On the left-hand side, you have your developer who is writing the code in his IDE, and Code Whisperer is actually available as an extension there. So what will Code Whisperer do is it will analyze your comments. In fact, even as you type your comments on the IDE, it will give you prompts to complete those comments too. And what the service ultimately would do is it would take into account a code context, that is the last 15 to 20 lines of your code prior to the cursor, and whatever comments that you have provided. And based on its learning, like just as humans go through years of practice, the service would suggest an entire block of code to you right in the IDE itself. And this is the Gen AI part of it. So I would actually have loved to present a demo on this, but given that we don't have much time, I'll quickly go through the screenshot here. So if you look at the screenshot here, what we have done is it's a PyCharm IDE, and I have installed Code Whisperer as an extension here. So if you see, what you see in green is a comment. So what would happen is even when you start writing that comment, the service will go ahead and it will try to complete that comment for you. And based on that comment and whatever libraries that you imported before, what the service is actually doing is it's suggesting that entire block of code to you. So whatever you see in the white area is the code suggested by Code Whisperer. So you can go ahead and you can accept this block of code, or it can also give you additional suggestions. So you can click on your arrow button, you can look for other suggestions too, and you can choose the most appropriate suggestion for your use case. And like given the model has been trained on billions of lines of code, there could be a possibility that a code suggestion may be sufficiently similar to the open source training data. So Code Whisperer is like completely capable of detecting such code snippets, and it will notify you as a developer with the repository and the licensing information as well, so that you can give that proper attribution to the author. So in this case, you can see like at the bottom, it's saying it's provided with reference under MIT from repository XYZ. So yeah. part of our like providing a responsible AI service to our customers. And additionally, again, since it's been trained on billions of lines of code, it might have learned some unwanted patterns, and those patterns may surface in your recommendation as well. So in order to mitigate such issues, what we have done is we have given a simple button, if you can see on the left hand side, which says run security scan, so that you can actually run a security scan right in your IDE. It will scan all the code that is generated by the code whisperer, and even the code that's generated by you. So yeah. So Code Whisperer can actually help you accelerate that straightforward but time-consuming coding activities, as well as it can suggest you code for unfamiliar tasks too. So especially in the case of in case you are writing a AWS application, it can suggest you code that follows the well-architected principles of AWS when you're writing code for EC2, S3. But otherwise as well, it can suggest code snippets for your entire application. So I guess we are a bit over time. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, thank you for being like such a wonderful audience, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions offline or even over email as well. Over to you, Alec.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Bhagarashi. And I just want to say a big thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time for questions, but you are very welcome to email. You see the email address here at the
Sure,
bottom
sure.
of the slide.
I'll
Excellent.
drop it.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the session. So it's very topical at the moment. Low code and no code is something that increasingly we're finding people wanting to talk about at conferences. So thank you. I just want to bring the event to a conclusion and say a huge thank you to all of our presenters today. They've been fantastic. We've had some great topics. It's been really pertinent. And I hope everyone's found it thought-provoking. You're going to take away some new ideas and tools that you can apply in your own organization. Finally, I'd like to just take a moment to thank my colleagues. We've got a fantastic team here at Unicom who've put many months of effort into putting the event together. And I just thought I'd share this slide. These are some of my colleagues who are involved in the event. We've had a fantastic time. We absolutely love putting these events together, and we'd really like to get your feedback on it. Feel free to drop us an email, and we hope we'll see you at our future events. We run events really globally throughout Asia Pac and Europe. We're holding a big conference in London on 19th of October, which is TestExpo, DevOps, Agile, and Low Code Expo. Same topics as today. It will be an in-person event. We actually launched that event over 25 years ago, and it's grown over the years. And we also are back in. We're going to be in Bangalore in November. We're holding a big conference, a big annual conference called World Conference Next Generation Testing. And that's also going to be co-located with the finals of the India Testing League and India Testing Awards. So I hope that some of you will be able to join us there. So again, thank you everybody for joining, and thanks to all of our speakers. Enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye.